our meeting to order at 6 o'clock, adjourn for an quick executive session, and then return to this meeting. We have as our first business in our open session, our annual public hearing on the budget. This is fairly late for us to have our public hearing on the budget. This year is a special year in that respect. Unfortunately, things went in a direction that none of us expected this year. And with that, we had to postpone some of the decisions that this committee takes and makes early on in the year. Many of you, I don't know who is with us today. First of all, thank you all for coming, whether you came for the public hearing or you came for the whole meeting and join us today. But as many of you know, the budget process really is nonstop for the schools. We start the new school year's budget almost as soon as we complete or vote on the previous year's budget, because it takes a lot of effort and a lot of work to be able to put all the information together to understand what the needs of our schools are, and then align that with what we are getting from the state starting in January. And on top of that, we have our conversations, and some of them you were able to see earlier in the year, a month or two ago. We have multiple meetings, either visiting some of the other town committees or having joint meetings with those town committees to discuss the school budget. The whole idea is really to, again, be able to gain a better understanding as to where we are financially, what the school's needs are, that's basically our budget, and then understand what the funds available to us are so that we can find the best balance between those. And because of that, this is a very iterative process to begin with. And what I mean by that, we never really remain with the first budget that we create. This committee, when the budget season kicks off, especially after the state's first version, which is called the governor's budget, this committee starts having multiple conversations. And as we learn more, both on the state side and the town side and the school side, we make changes to our budget. And therefore, by the time we get to these public hearings, what we present is typically quite a bit different than what we started with. And that's a good thing, because that shows that everybody's doing their due diligence to better understand what is available to us to make the best decision possible. So before we get to these public hearings, typically the school committee has a meeting. And again, often the week before, where we review the final available version of our budget. We ask questions, we refine, and then we push that budget public hearing to present with all of you, the members of our community, who join us at our meetings. And that's basically the concept of public hearing. This year, again, just like everything else, things changed a little between last week and this week. Our superintendent was able to have a conversation with our town administrator late last week. I believe it was on Friday. And we came to understand that our town administrator submitted a budget to the finance committee that was different than what we had discussed and agreed to review during the public hearing. So the good news is the overall numbers are now in much better shape. Some of the concerns that we shared last week when we were discussing that version of the budget, some of those concerns are alleviated, some of them are removed. So we are actually happy conversation on this newer version of the budget. Because the school committee members have only seen a version of it this weekend, and obviously we did not have a meeting to be able to discuss, part of the conversation will also involve school committee members, and they may have some questions. So don't be surprised, those of you who are at the public hearing, when we have some questions, because we really are meeting for the first time, and this is the first time we're going to have some opportunity to ask about the version that's going to be shared with you. So with that introduction, a couple of quick ground rules. Public hearing is not the same thing as our visitors' comments section. We're going to get to that when we return to our regular meeting. Public hearing is really that. We are happy to have members of our public join us and listen to the presentation or watch the presentation around our budget and then ask questions. Some of the same rules apply. We would like to ask all of you to be precise and as brief as possible in your questions. If you do not get the answer to your questions, you will have an opportunity to ask more. Again, unlike the visitors' comments section, this is a dialogue that we want to have until those of you who have questions have your questions answered. We would like to ask you to refrain from comments that are not related to the budget during the public hearing. If they are relevant to the meeting that we're going to have afterwards, if you can remain with us and save those questions for the visitors or comments for the visitors comments section, that would be much appreciated. Again, because of the virtual environment that we're in, what we're going to need to do, Alex, correct me if I'm wrong on this one, we will have to move those of you who would like to ask questions or who would like to make a comment related to the budget to the panel that we are on, the school committee is on, so that it can be heard. Otherwise, where you are, you're not able to really, you're not able to be heard. Is that correct, Alex?
So Emery, just to clarify, I can allow an attendee to talk, but without having to allow them to be on the actual panel. It's
we can do that?
like
Okay.
Q&A when in an actual seminar type of thing.
Okay, so we don't need to move them to this side for that. That's good clarification. Thank you for that. So
You're welcome.
That being clarified, Alex will have to unmute those who will speak, correct, Alex? So
correct. All I gotta say is loud to talk and then they'll be set to go.
So for you to know whether you have comments, questions, please use the same approach we had before. I believe everybody is able to see Q&A on your screens.
Alex had said earlier, sorry to interrupt, to have them raise their hand.
Okay, so whichever it was selected earlier, any one of those things that work is fine. Please raise your hand. Alex, do you have a list of those folks who are raising their hands? Because I don't think I see.
Not yet. Not yet. So they'll have to.
Okay, but you will have a list of those folks, and
yes, so their name will pop up, and I'll be able to allow them to talk.
Awesome. So
before we get any further, I'm going to share my screen. Can you guys just let me know if you can see the presentation? I'm going to show you the first slide of the presentation.
Yeah, we were able to see it before.
We can see it.
Okay, I just want to make sure. Okay, awesome.
Thank you for confirming.
Yep.
Alex, can you please explain how folks can raise their hands for those folks who are not familiar with Zoom? What's the way to raise hands?
I believe in the participants part of it, there's a button that says raise your hand, and they'll be able to raise their hand. Either that or it should be in the Q&A. I'm a little rusty on that, but I believe it should be in the participants area.
Okay. It should be at the bottom of their screen.
Yeah, exactly.
It should be at the bottom of their screen. Okay.
And then for the panelists, if you click participants, we can actually see the names and who has their hands up. So we can see that too.
Cool. All right, so with that, we're gonna open our public hearing. It is 6:43 with that intro. If you have any questions, please use that feature to raise your hands, and we're going to unmute you for your comments and questions. If you cannot, for some reason, see that feature, feel free to just put something in Q&A, and we will pull you in as well.
One more quick clarification. Adam is going to present and talk first, correct? And then the questions will start as he's sharing?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
I think it's going to be kind of a combination of myself, Cheryl, if she can chime in, and Emery, or obviously anybody on the committee if they want to chime in. We have a few slides to present, nothing crazy, but we can go through that, and then as people have questions, they can raise their hand. It might be a little too much. I would ask that we kind of keep all questions at the end, unless you guys want to answer them as we go. To be honest, it doesn't matter to me. I just don't know how clean we want to keep this because we're doing it virtually.
Yeah, Adam, honestly, unfortunately, maybe, but I think it's going to be cleaner if we wait until you finish it, because otherwise there's no way really to unmute folks as they want to ask questions when you're presenting. And as you mentioned, you only have a few slides, so hopefully that will work for everyone.
Yep. Okay. So I'm going to share this. And again, please, if you guys can just confirm that you can see it now that I have it up there.
Yes. Yep. Go ahead.
Okay. All right. So like Emery said, there's only a few slides in this presentation. It's going to be a high level overview, and then hopefully we can get to specifics if anyone has questions at the end. Just a kind of a quick build up to this. As Emery mentioned, Cheryl was able to have a conversation with Chris Martin, the town administrator, late last week. He did inform us that the school department's portion of a balanced budget included the preliminary revenue figures from the state from back in February. And the only cut that we would see in revenue would be $100,000 of the $305,000 override that's been in place. Emery, correct me, I want to say 10, 12, maybe even 15 years, I believe, that was voted in.
Yeah, something like that.
So, and not to get into too much detail about past versions of the budget that we have presented and past cuts, and there were different iterations. We had provided Chris with a 2% cut, a 5% cut, and then we had projected a 10% cut in Chapter 70 revenue. Essentially, all of those budgets that we have put out, and hopefully most of you guys have seen, will not make a difference. So what we're going to present tonight is a lot better picture than what we have shown everyone in the past.
Yeah. Adam, do you mind if I add something on that one? So
Certainly.
Again,
Yep.
As I mentioned, this is an iterative process, and this year being a year where there is a lot more uncertainty, we created multiple versions with those reductions that Adam mentioned at the request of the town. Because one important element of these budgeting processes is our collaboration with the town. The school budget it belongs to the schools, but at the end of the day, we sit down and discuss and negotiate about certain aspects of our budget every year. This year, that process became a little more challenging because of all the uncertainty that surrounds the numbers that we are receiving from the state. For that reason, we were asked to do a few things by the town. One was a version of the budget that would reflect a 2% reduction from the fiscal year budget. Another one, 20 budget minus 5%. And on top of that, we went ahead based on what we're hearing from different sources. We went ahead and created a version of the budget that had 10% reduction state aid, which was the version that we were originally intending discussed. Our understanding is that when our town officials had conversations with the elected officials, state elected officials, they came to an understanding that currently the conversation is going in the direction of at least trying to keep the education funding as close as what it was before the crisis began. And was the driver of our town administrator just presenting the budget that hit it to the finance committee. So what I mean by that is that this year is the first year that the state is calculating the aid based on a new formula. And that was really reflective of a new legislation that was passed only recently. It's called the Student Opportunity Act. And Student Opportunity Act, unlike many years before, or all the years prior to that, it started taking into account certain factors for really disabling school districts like us. That was not really accounting for certain difficulties and challenges that a small or rural school district is experiencing. So we were really happy when that law passed and we received the first numbers, the set of numbers based on the Student Opportunity Act. That's when we basically came to a halt because we had to stop based on the uncertainty. And those versions that Adam mentioned, the 2% off of FY20, 5% off of FY20, and different versions based on reduction in Chapter 70, which is the education funding from the state. On this year's budget, those were all different iterations and scenarios that we went through as part of our collaboration with the town. Sorry, Adam, I just thought maybe that might be.
No, that's good. And obviously we've taught that there's, again, because of those multiple iterations, there is some confusion out there. So anything that we can do to limit that as we go forward, Emily, thank you. So that's good. So I'm going to move on to the next slide. What this is right here, it kind of breaks down how we get our revenue from the state and or the town's in-kind contribution, the total overall cost of what it takes to run the district, and then how we use some of our revenue like school choice, circuit breaker, and grants to offset that gap. So I'll go through these in a little more detail. I don't want to bore everyone with the details, but I'll go through them in a little more detail. Chapter 70 is the formula that the state comes up with. It's based on our enrollment and the different pockets of enrollment that we have. And that formula is derived at the state level. The required local contribution is also a formula that's derived at the state level, which tells the town of Granby how much they need to spend on education for the schools. Those two numbers at the top, the 4.6 million and the 5.2 million, if you add those two together, that's what we get that we refer to as net school spending. I know we throw that number around a lot, and some of the new members and some people out in the community might not know what net school spending is. Those two numbers add up to what we need to spend at a minimum on education on a yearly basis. That's what they call net school spending. The next line, the 205,797, that's that town override that's been in place for several years now. In the past, it's been 305,797. In Cheryl's conversations with Chris last week, they are recommending a cut of $100,000 to that number. The next line is our transportation line. So that was we just awarded a new bid to start July 1 to First Student. That this number includes our regular day transportation. Now, really quickly, when that bid was going out, the COVID pandemic kind of just started and was ramping up into the stages where schools shut down. So these numbers that they came back with in the contract, they might look totally different come the fall when we know what reopening schools will look like. So this number right now is a placeholder. It includes regular transportation. It includes a line item for our special education transportation, and it includes a line item for athletic transportation and field trip and other school bus transportation. So again, I just want to let everyone know that contract went out to bid. We awarded it to first student. It starts July 1, but these numbers, I'm gonna say it's safe to say that these numbers will change based on what reopening will look like in the fall. It might be more, it might be less. I'm not sure. For now, it's a placeholder. The other important thing about transportation is it's a totally separate article from the town. So we provide them with our actual operating budget, what it costs to run the schools, and then we also provide them with this transportation number that is voted on by the town people at town meeting. For at least committee members, any question on those numbers so far? Okay. So then you'll see it says total state/local revenue. So what that is just adding up those top four numbers, and that is the revenue that we would see from the state and then from the town for fiscal year 21. That next line is the town in-kind contribution. So the town charges us for payroll services, maintenance services, health insurance. There's a list of things that the town will charge us for. And you'll see that number, that 2.4 number, which went up about a couple $100,000 compared to FY20 because there was a large increase in health insurance costs. That number is then subtracted from that total state local revenue number of 10.9 million. And what you'll see is the town allocation to the school of 8.559 million. What I like to refer to that number is that is the actual quote unquote check that the town will cut to the school to spend for FY21. Now it's our job to make sure we reconcile to that number, but that is essentially the amount of money the town will allocate to the schools for us to operate in FY21. Does that make sense to committee members so far?
Yes, just a quick clarification that we don't necessarily receive a check in that amount.
Yeah.
We don't, in fact, do those checks. It goes through the town anyway. Whatever expenses we do, it has to go through the town.
Yep. Thank you. Yeah, that's why I say quote unquote check, but it's the easiest way to kind of explain that's the money that the town at the end of the day will allocate to the school department. So then the next line you'll see is the school operating budget. So this is what it takes to run the school at full capacity. $10.5 million is what it takes to operate the school for fiscal year 21. Obviously, you can see that's in the next line, that's about 1.9, almost $2 million more than what the town is going to allocate to us for FY21. And that's where our revenue streams like our grants, Title I, Title IIA, Title IV, we have special education IDA grants, some other local and state or federally funded grants, and then school choice and circuit breaker. That's where these revenues help us offset the gap between what it costs to operate the school and what the town is going to allocate to us for the year. I'd like to caution everyone, these are projected revenues. And in this year, more than others, because we don't know the financial outlook and how grants will look and other funding sources other than Chapter 70 will look, these are projected. Now they're pretty accurate projections, but they are projections, and they could go up and down depending on how things shake out for the FY21 budget at the state level. But these are solely projections. Based on, for school choice, based on projected enrollment that we will see next year. And then for circuit breaker, which we've already filed that claim this year. So you file the claim this year, you receive the revenue next year. We've already filed that claim. We're up about $50,000 compared to last year. So these are projected. You know, we're focusing on these on a daily or weekly basis. As new information comes, we're updating these, but this is why it's important. One of the reasons school choice is important, and one of the reasons we provide services to our special education students is important, is because that revenue helps us offset the budget. So you take all that into consideration, the $10.5 million that it costs to operate the school, the funding gap of 1.978, the revenue that we offset that with, and our total school operating budget for the year, for fiscal year 21, is $8.559 million. Any questions from the committee on that breakdown, where those numbers come from, how we get to those numbers? Any questions before we move on how that formula is kind of driven? Okay. The next slide. So this is kind of just a, some people are good with numbers. Some people are kind of seeing it in either a pie chart or a graph. So what this does is kind of just give you the visualization of where our money comes from, and how much of the pie that it takes up. So this just breaks those numbers down in the previous slide into a pie chart to kind of see where, obviously Chapter 70 and the required local contribution are the two biggest pieces of our budget, but then you'll see the offsets. Our revenue plays a huge part in allowing us to reconcile to what the town allocates to us for any fiscal year, in this case, FY21. Any questions on that slide? Again, so more for the visual people. So this just kind of breaks out what percentage of our budget is personnel and salary costs. You can see there it's about $7.8 million, or 74% of our budget. And then what is supplies and services, and you can see it's 26%, or about $2.7 million. Really, the importance of this slide is to show, obviously, as you can see, that 3/4 of our budget is made up of salary, and what I want to say is non-discretionary costs. I mean, we can negotiate salaries, we can fill positions, we can do things that can lower this number, but essentially these are fixed costs. We can't change these costs on a yearly basis. This is what we're given. And I just want to show that 3/4 of our budget is made up of fixed costs for the most part. That 26%, the supplies and services, that's the number. That's our discretionary funding. That's where we essentially can make cuts to or move money around to fund the district for any fiscal year. Questions on that slide? So the next slide, and this is where we get into some details. This is just broken down by department, and as I'm assuming all of you can see at the top there, which is probably the hot topic question, is that based on the conversations that Cheryl had with Chris last week, we will not need to cut athletics for FY21. But this is just a breakdown by department. Obviously, you can tell by the column headings. There's personnel, which is salaries. OTPS is other than personal services, so anything that's not a salary. That gives us a total. So that total at the bottom, that $10.5 million, and like I said in a couple slides ago, that's what it actually costs to operate the district. The next column is offsets. We try to apply the offsets to each department as we see. And then you'll see the adjusted total is that $8.5 million. And then the last column is in percent. So this is really just breaking it down by department so we can see where we are spending our money for FY21. Questions on that side? Okay, I'll move on. This is just, again, another chart, kind of shows how we're going to project spending for FY21. You'll see at the bottom, personnel services, again, salary is that light blue portion, and like that pie chart, that those costs dominate our budget. And then the darker blue is supplies and services. You'll see SPED is probably the one department where supplies and services is more than personnel services, but that's because we have a lot of out-of-district tuition. So again, this is just another visual to put those numbers into perspective on how we plan on spending for FY21. Questions on that? So here's the big slide, and as Emery mentioned, there has been multiple iterations up till tonight on budgets and what we were going to cut based on what was asked of us from the town. So given the numbers and given the parameters from the town that Cheryl got last week, this is where our projected cuts are going to come from FY21. So again, you'll see athletics will not be cut. There was a few teaching positions that we had projected to cut. They will not be cut, so we'll stay out of the classroom in that aspect. A lot of these numbers, district-wide supplies, obviously it's $40,000 of supplies that we're going to have to cut either at the district level, at the elementary school, at the high school. But again, as we've done with all the other iterations, we tried our hardest to stay out of the classroom and be least impactful with teaching positions as we could. So these are the cuts that we will present, we will project. These could change, they could go up, they could go down based on the information we get from the state as we move throughout the summer. But this is the cut list that we are going to present for FY21.
Adam, can you kind of give us a breakdown of what is encompassed in district-wide supplies for that $38,000?
Yeah, so it's either office supplies at the district main office level, or it's classroom supplies at the elementary school or the high school. And then up top, you can see facility maintenance supplies. So those are other cleaning supplies. We cut a little bit. Again, unfortunately, when cuts are needed, supplies, if we want to stay out of the classroom, supplies are the, I don't want to say easiest, but the easiest and first thing to go at so we can stay out of the classroom. These are pretty large numbers, and they will have some impact on the classrooms, but I think we will be okay. This does not deplete the supply line items for all departments, but it does. It doesn't give them much wiggle room for fiscal year 21.
So I was thinking it would be, I didn't see or recognize the facilities and maintenance supplies. So with the guidelines that have gone out for COVID stuff, with that cut for 30,000, I guess, and the maintenance supplies is where it would be, with additional cleaning supplies and masks and things like that. Is that the wiggle room that you're talking about, or have you guys already built that part in? So
excellent question. So we kind of, when the pandemic first hit back in March, we did a pretty good job of getting ahead of it and ordering some supplies before everyone kind of realized they needed to order some supplies. So we do have some surplus for that. Also, the town has applied for MEMA and FEMA grants, and we provided them with a lot of detail on things that we may need for FY21 when it comes to supplies. Unfortunately, without knowing at this point what the reopening of schools are going to look like, the costs, yes, those costs for buying supplies, they could be more. We could be, based on what the guidance from the state is, we may need to move some money around and give that 30,000 back to maintenance so we can purchase PPEs and supplies for the school year. Again, there's still a lot of unknowns with how we're going to reopen in the fall. So as of right now, these are, again, I want to say easiest just in terms of being able to maneuver some of these amounts around if we need to.
Adam, do you mind also giving a little clarity with the Granby High School phone system, what that cut would do?
Yeah, so the plan was to update the phone system in the high school similar to the one that was in East Meadow. Obviously, the one in East Meadow, with it being a new building, is has a lot of different functions embedded in it. And obviously with the high school being as old as it is, the phone system is also out of date. So we were hoping to update the phone system to around the same capacity as East Meadow. It's certainly not something that we need. It was more of a want. Yeah, it's certainly something that would have been nice for this year, but I think, unfortunately, if we had to wait a year or two, we could certainly go without it.
All right, thank you. I just wanted to clarify that that was an upgrade, so they would just keep the current system that they have.
Correct. Yep. And also, and I know this has come up in the past, that this list is in no priority. It's not. There's no priority given to one of these line items to another. This is just how we came up with this list. So. But yes, to clarify, yeah, we would be okay moving forward with the current phone system at the high school.
Jen, I got disconnected part of the conversation in response to your question, but with the DESE guidelines that came up last week, there was also some conversation around the state looking to compensate the districts for some of their expenses related to the additional materials, PPE, and everything else that we will need. I'm not sure that the numbers are yet clear or communicated to us, but I think that's going to be a continuing conversation to make sure that we have what we need to make sure that the kids are safe. And we can just, move some of these amounts around to make sure that we have the funds available. Go ahead, Adam.
I think I went through every one of the cuts. I'm not sure if anyone has any other specific questions on the cuts. I believe that is the last slide, so we can open it up for discussion. But I just want to make sure before we do that, if the committee has any other questions, if you'd like me to review any other slides, I'd love to explain more if you guys need it.
Now that I can see the entire committee, anyone else before we turn it to our visitors? Okay. All right. So again, if you can use the raise hand feature, if you are seeing it, give us an indication on the Q&A. Please keep your questions to the budget, as I mentioned. And if you have any follow-up, you will have that opportunity. Do not feel that you have to ask all your questions at once. We're here basically tonight primarily for the purpose of this public hearing. So feel free to ask and comment, and we'll start with that.
Okay, so we have Richard Domorowski, I believe.
Demaraki? Okay.
All right.
Go ahead, Rich.
Alex, Rich Damaraki, Bachelor Street. I have a question for Adam. I've always tried to find ways to compare Granby's budget, school budget, to other communities, and it's very difficult because there's so many variables. But I found it interesting that personnel services are 74% of the total budget. Now, have you compared Granby to other communities to find out if that 74% for personnel services is lower or higher than other communities? Because there's always been the question, does Granby have too many teachers or administrators? So I think a chart would be very helpful to compare Granby to other communities, maybe such as Hatfield, Hadley, Belchertown, South Hadley, smaller communities that have basically the same number of students. So it'd be very helpful for the townspeople to know what that percentage is compared to Granby.
Yeah, Rich, first, thank you. Thank you for the question. Your input obviously is always appreciated. Yeah, we certainly do. We certainly do compare those numbers versus surrounding districts, but I don't think that would tell the whole story because obviously each district's needs are entirely different. So just comparing the amount of teachers or the percentage of personnel from Granby to another district, I'm not so sure that tells the entire story of of the educational needs of Granby or another district, whatever other district that would be that we compare to. So it certainly would be useful information, but I don't think it'd be just as easy as, Granby's 75% personnel and a Hatfield, like you had suggested, is 70%. I don't think that tells the whole story as to the needs for our community.
Okay, and just one last question. Does that personnel services, does that include fringe benefits such as medical and life insurance and taxes?
No, that personnel services is just strictly based salary, because the health insurance portion, that's where we're charged the in-kind from the town. So that calculation is done on the town side. So the personnel, really, if we want to include the insurance portion of it, that personnel services percentages, it would be higher. But in our budget, it's just the base salary for our employees.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
I would like to speak, please.
Go ahead.
I would just like to thank administration and the school committee for doing their best not to affect the children in the classroom with anything that has to be cut. I understand the supplies is always one of the first things to go, and teachers always seem to manage. But thank you for staying away from cutting staff.
Thank you, Robin. I think I will look to you because I don't really see the hands or anything. Just if you can one by one allow folks to speak, that would be great.
Right now, there's no other hands up. But I
Really?
see.
I think I saw Megan's hand up.
Wait, I just saw one go up and then it went down. Mike?
Okay, I'm going to allow Mike to speak here. Go ahead.
Mike, go ahead. Maybe it was raised by accident.
It looks like he turned his mic on and off, so he's like trying to figure it out.
Okay.
Like,
Maybe that's what it is.
is there a way maybe they could type in their question in the Q&A?
Sure. I mean, any one of those means, because this is an unusual way for us to do the public hearing.
Right.
Of course, yeah.
Maybe that's an
I
option.
also see Kim and J.R. Goldsmith posted in the Q&A that they would like to speak. I'm not
That's,
sure.
I think that's,
That
Kim,
was in there
is-
from the very beginning. I think that might be.
yeah, I think
for
that's
Okay, visitor
first
comment.
comment. Yeah.
Right.
Rich Demaraki raised his hand again.
Go ahead, Rich.
All right, Rich, you're on.
Okay, since no one else has any other questions, I just had one quick question. On social media, a question was raised about whether the school committee has ever turned over any surplus money left at the end of the year back to the town, ever. Now, I don't recall that ever happening. Could you clarify that?
Emery, you can also chime in, but I know that question has come up, and it certainly came up, I think, back in February when we presented to the select board. And I know last year we did have a surplus of FY19 money. However, when we sat down at a joint committee with, it was myself, Cheryl, it was some members of the school committee, it was some members of the select board, and it was some members of the finance committee. All of that was spelled out, and we also spelled out a plan on what we would like to do with that surplus. And our plan at that point was to get the district fully or close to 100% one-to-one Chromebook or computer device compatible. We had those discussions at that meeting. The town, all of the representatives at that meeting gave the school department their blessing on that, and we moved forward with that. And Rich, thank you for that question, because that certainly came up earlier in the year. that the town never knows how much surplus that we have, or we never give it back to them. And I know at least for last year, we were all at the table. We had that conversation. They gave their blessing on us using it for technology. And that's what we did. We equipped the school district with one-to-one compatible devices.
Thank you.
Thank goodness we did, because it came in handy.
Mike did end up
yes,
typing his
actually.
question.
Is Mike back?
So
He
Mike
typed in his
actually wrote
question.
the Q&A. Do you want me to read it out?
Go ahead.
So,
Let me,
Look,
go ahead.
okay, so Mike said, with the budget as tight as it is, what happens if and when things change with DESI requirements due to the pandemic? Is the district expecting to go back to town meeting?
So, I mean, I'm just going to chime in real quick, and then you or anybody else in the committee can obviously speak to this. Although we are in the middle of a pandemic and there's a lot of questions unanswered, the process as to how we are doing the budget this year is no different than any other year. The first step is having school committee vote a budget, and then we present that article to the town at town meeting. Even without a pandemic happening right now, there are still 2 more iterations of the budget at the state level that we would be waiting for on a normal year. There's still the Senate Ways and Means version, and then obviously Governor Baker's version that he would sign into law. At that point, we would reconcile our budget. So the process this year is no different, other than there's a lot of questions unknown and the amounts are certainly unknown. But the process that we're following right now is one that we follow every year. We would reconcile that once the governor signs the final budget into law. Again, because of the pandemic with so many questions unanswered, we're in a little bit of a tighter spot this year, but the process remains the same every year on how we would vote the budget and then reconcile the budget once the governor signs it into law.
So my budget reflects what we know currently, whether it's on the revenue side or expense side, and the needs of the school district. If your question is about a possibility, and hopefully never happens, that certain things changing for the worse and us needing more money. At that time, there are several things that can be done. One is obviously our school district would not be the only one affected. So I would hope that there is more global state level conversation and attempt to fund some of those additional expenses. You're asking whether it would go to a town meeting. That would be a special town meeting if there were shortages that were disabling the school district. But I can assure you that at least the last few years, the school district's approach to finance and financial planning has been to first look inward. Is there any opportunity for us to really find some efficiencies, someplace where we can accommodate those additional expenses? And we've done that several times, and this typically happens without the public really knowing some of those adjustments being done. We would first look for that to see whether or not we can do anything internally before we go. We have to go out and look for the funds, especially at a special town meeting. But I'm hoping that never happens. And if it happens, or something similar happens, that we're going to have the first interaction. Our first interaction would be with the state to see whether or not funds available for that type of emergency situation. Thank you for that question, by the way.
So Mike said he was concerned about the ability to move money between line items.
Respond to that? You want me to?
I mean, I can certainly. So one of the good things about the school department having a school committee is we have the autonomy of moving money around. I don't want to say as needed or as we want, but since even though we are a town department, we do operate under our own committee, which that committee obviously approves moving money around. So as we progress through the summer and we know the financial picture from the state, we are certainly, I would assume, certainly going to have to move money between line items. Again, in a normal year, we'd be doing that anyway, because now once this budget gets voted in, I'm going to go back to each department and we're going to review the budgets again. We're going to tighten up the budget. So again, just because the pandemic of this year doesn't change the process, and we would be moving money around and tightening up the budget once it's voted in tonight, all the way until we get to town meeting. So again, we certainly, I would assume, would have to move money around to different line items as we progress through the summer and we know what the financial outlook is going to be.
We have two people raising their hands, but I'm going to jump in and ask a question, and I feel like it's kind of the elephant in the room question, but I'm going to ask it. So how confident are we, since athletics has been and drama has been sort of on the top line, not top line in priority or anything, but big ticket items, how confident are we that we're good with these numbers and that they're safe?
Again, I don't want to sound like a broken record, but we're only as safe as what we know today
Right.
from the state. And unfortunately, that's once Chris informed Cheryl that the balanced budget he submitted to the town for the school department included the original revenue projections from the state, and he gave us those parameters to move forward with. Unfortunately, at this point, that's all we have to go on. What I would say is on our either school choice or circuit breaker, we do have some flexibility and some surplus in those funds that if it did come late July or August now, where we'd have to cut athletics, and I'm not saying that's the case. I hope it's not the case. I'm sure we would be able to fund athletics in a different way. But at the same time, if that was to be the case, where at the end of the day, the numbers come in less, and if we want to stay out of the classroom, we would need to go back to athletics. That's where we need people at town meeting floor, and advocating for the school and for athletics and saying, it's unacceptable during this crazy time that we're living in and the uncertainty of reopening and how that's going to look for our kids not to have athletics. I think you brought that point up a few meetings ago, Jen, and I totally agree. Unfortunately, the parameters that we were given in the last month, in order for us to stay out of the classroom, athletics was a big chunk of that cut.
Right.
Fortunately, right now, where we stand right now, we don't need to cut athletics. Tomorrow that might change. Unfortunately, there's a lot of unknowns at this point.
Right. So it's like I just kind of want it to be out there that this looks fantastic and everyone's thrilled, and I'm over the moon that it looks like drama and music is saved and athletics are saved, but it's we kind of can't let our guard down. Like, these are still potential. There is a slight possibility that things may not stay the way that they're looking right now, right?
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, I would say it's probably more than a slight possibility. There's probably, there's certainly a possibility that the financial picture over the next month may change dramatically. Unfortunately, right now, like I said, the parameter that we were given from the town, this is the budget and the details that we'll move forward with.
Perfect, thank you. I think we should probably go with Kim and JR next. They've been had their hand up the longest.
They're good to go.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Hi, Kim Goldsmith, 239 Taylor Street. JR actually had a question, but he was waiting so long, he just stepped out. Hopefully he'll get back in before we're done. Obviously, very happy to see this new proposal with the budget. My biggest concern is, I did look at South Hadley and Belchertown just to see what their thoughts were. I know everybody keeps saying it's very hard to compare our school to their school. But, unfortunately, a lot of children do school choice out to these other two schools. So that's why, you know, I had looked just to see if people are looking for different opportunities, what they would find. And other schools are projecting for a bigger cut, more like a 15 to 20%. And, you know, they're cutting things like, you know, vice principals, because they probably think that there'll be less children in the schools. You know, and my biggest concern is, I don't want to sound like a bad person. I mean, I love Mr. Taylor. He's been great with the kids, but I thought his position was just kind of a trial one, being the dean. And I feel like, you know, a $90,000 cut with, you know, putting him back in this 5th grade teacher position that we're searching for would be a benefit to our school in this difficult time. You know, and not to.
Okay, I don't know
I
what.
froze for a long time there, so I'm sorry. I don't know if anybody else did, but I froze for
I think
a
we
really
all
long time.
did.
Yeah, I did
I think
too.
we're all lost.
Me out. You kicked me
I
out.
think we all got lost.
Looks like we did not lose the participants, though.
Phew.
So
Fact, we have
the last thing I
higher
heard
number.
from Kim, was about Mr. Taylor's position and possibly
I'm gonna get her
the
back
need
on. Hold
for
on.
not.
So, Adam?
Yeah, can you
Adam?
guys hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. Do you mind if I take
Yeah.
that one very quickly? So at this
Yeah, go
point,
ahead.
we are going to present the budget the way it is. I know that we had several conversations about the dean position, but just a clarification on the comment that it was a trial. Yes, it was actually a position that we tried. It came back to the school committee, and based on what we had seen, we had decided to go forward with that. Could there be, just like everything else, some conversations going forward about anything? Yes, but we're not going to discuss specific positions in the budget in this public hearing.
Okay, you guys didn't hear any one of my question, right?
If I may.
No,
can
we did
also-
not, JR. Go ahead.
Okay. So, like I said,
So
good evening.
can
How are
I?
you?
So just before we move,
I
Just before we move
hear
forward, I just want to speak.
someone else, Mrs.
Carol's
Hepworth.
trying to answer.
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Guys, can you hear me?
Yes.
Can.
So
Adam, we
just
hear you,
before we
but
move
Cheryl's
forward.
trying to talk.
Okay, just before we move forward, and I understand the necessity and the reasons to compare ourselves to other districts. However, a couple of those other districts that were mentioned are funded so far above net school spending that they can afford to make cuts like that and still operate. So again, I'm all for comparing our district to other districts, but comparing to a Belchertown or another district that is so far funded over net school spending, we can't compare ourselves to that. Unfortunately, they can make those cuts and still operate above net school spending. We wouldn't be able to make those cuts and operate over net school spending.
Just made me think, Adam, is we had those slides from when we had the presentation of how the nearby districts do above net school spending. Do you by any chance have that?
Yeah, we do. I don't know if I could pull it up now, but we could certainly,
That would
I'm
be
sure
a
we could
good
put
one
it
to
out on the
show.
website or something. Yeah, but again, and I want to repeat, I'm all for comparisons, but we need to keep in mind what we're comparing, and us comparing us to Belchertown where they're funded higher than net school spending than we are is just, it's not a good comparison.
Right.
I think what Audrey was getting at though was actually showing how under, or how much more Belchertown, for example, is funded is what she's talking about comparing, just so that people can see that we're trying to work within a very small percentage over net school spending. So if we were to compare, maybe showing that slide from, I can't remember what that presentation was in February, but someone had come in to talk about rural school spending and had a chart showing Granby, I believe, was the second lowest in the Commonwealth that's funded over net school spending.
Yeah, so we can, unless Cheryl can share it now, which I don't think she does, we can put that up either on the live feed or the website, but we can certainly get that out ASAP so people can see that.
So can I ask my question now?
Go ahead, JR.
Okay, so my question was, and Adam, you probably can answer this roundabout way because you probably don't know 100%. My question was, you know, do we have a budget for PPE supplies for Granby? Is there a, you know, a comparison of maybe, you know, like what other schools, you know, around us are doing with money set aside? Because I don't think anybody knows, you know, obviously if we're going back to school in September, if we do go back to school in September, on what type of basis, if it's a full-time basis, you know, with the hand washing stations, the masks and everything like that. So I was just wondering, like, do you, in this budget, do you have something set aside, a certain amount of money that you feel comfortable with that can handle, you know, these items that, you know, you're kind of looking at? And just lastly, you know, I've been seeing a lot of you know, the hand sanitizers that have been around, and, you know, how, you know, toxic they are, and, you know, some are coming from here and there, and, you know, they're pulling them off the shelves and everything. And, you know, I think even the ones that aren't toxic, you know, ones that are, you know, qualified, approved, you know, over time, they're not good for us as humans. I don't know if they have more effect on children than they do, you know, older people, you know, and just, you know, I just didn't know if you guys had a specific budget or what your thoughts were on how much, you know, you got to put aside to, you know, accommodate all of these, you know, new guidelines for that.
Yeah, so like you said, we don't know what reopening will look like. So we just got the guidance from the state last week about the plans that we need to set forth, and our leadership team is in the process of doing that. So we don't know, you know, if we're going to be back 100% capacity, a week on, a week off. We're not sure yet. So to project the cost is difficult right now. However, the town, like I mentioned before, has applied for some MEMA and FEMA funds, and those funds include costs that we have incurred since the beginning of the pandemic, which I think is March, through the end of this fiscal year, which is tomorrow, and then projected costs for next year. So we have submitted that information to the town. We're gonna, at this point, rely on the town to fund part, if not all of those costs. We just don't know. We just don't know what those are yet. And once we do know how we are going to reopen and how we will be educating kids, again, that's where it comes, where we do have the flexibility to move money around line items. Once we know, we can certainly you know, take money from one place and move it to a supply line item for PPEs. But again, to your point, since we don't know what the reopening is going to look like, it's hard to come up with a number that will satisfy.
Are we guaranteed to get any funds from FEMA, or that's just
So I know during the first round of funding, I want to say the town got a little less than $600,000, or they're eligible for $600,000. That's townwide, so that's got to be split for every department. I'm not sure how that all shakes out. That'd be a select board or town administrator question. The other problem that we're going to run into is that we are one of 360 plus districts in the Commonwealth that are going to be fighting for PPE supplies, right. And the costs are so astronomical now because the demand obviously is there. We're going to be fighting. So I mean, I know that we want to order some stuff, and, you know, we're seeing dates of September and October for some pretty basic supplies. So that's going to be another hurdle that we're going to have to overcome. Aside from projecting how much we're going to need is when will we be able to take delivery of it, and will we have it for the reopening of schools?
Can I ask just this too? And Adam, thanks so much for that answer.
Yep.
Do you have to buy PPE supplies from a certain supplier, or can you go out and bid it out?
So what the state did is they're going to they asked each district to provide them. They gave us a list of PPEs. Granby filled out what we thought we would need. We submitted that back to the state, just like every other district. And what they were going to do is put out a formative bid for a bunch of those supplies to try to keep the cost down and hopefully the inventory secluded to the state of Mass. I'm not sure where they are in that process, but at this point, it's pretty much if we can find them somewhere. Unfortunately, we're going to have to pay top dollar if they have something in stock, just because again the demand is high and there's a lot of there's shortage in PPE supplies throughout the country, not just obviously the state.
So if I told you that I have a supplier in Dallas, Texas, that I can get you supplies of hand sanitizer, masks, gloves, whatever that you need at a unbelievably reduced rate, okay, from my contact in Atlanta, Georgia, okay, who has brought in PPE supplies by the truckload, filled C-5 airplanes up with PPE supplies over the last 90 days. You can, as a town, benefit from that because the costs are so low. You would be able to buy this on your own. You don't do this through the state, right? You have that option to say, okay, look at, we have 300,000. This is what we're looking for. What can we get for this? And you can fund a purchase like that. Not that I'm saying that I want to go sell you PPE supplies. I'm just saying, is that something that, the town of Granby can do?
Adam,
I would just say
So if I may, can you
Go ahead.
hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yeah.
So we work with Nancy Jenks, the nurse leader, to identify appropriate sourcing and to make sure that whatever we're purchasing meets the criteria for safeties, whether it's the hand sanitizer and any other supplies that are going to be needed for COVID-19, but also the whole nursing suite.
And to that point too, as long as we're conforming to Chapter 30B, quote and bid regulations, we can purchase. At this point, we can purchase PPE supplies from anywhere as long as they meet the standards and regulations that Nancy informs us of. Again, the state is trying to make that easier, but again, there's a shortage and there's a high demand. So it's kind of first come, first serve, and if we can find stuff, we're going to purchase it.
May I just suggest this? Jared, thanks for the question and the suggestions. So I don't think we have the full answer. Probably the Board of Health maybe one of the participants in conversation of that nature. If you would like to reach out to Adam, please do so. We would like to have more information and go with Nancy and then get back to you with an answer. How's that?
Yeah, that's fine. If I can help out in any way, I do have somebody in Atlanta that is a big supplier that comes out of Dallas that in the pricing is very, very good. Just put it that way. And if I can help you out.
Let us do our research, our due diligence, and then if you can just again reach out to Adam with that information, we'll go from there.
Sure. Have a great night, guys.
You too. Thank you. Thanks for the questions. Do I see any other hands?
There, Steve Goodhind had his hand raised a number of times, and I don't know if he puts it down because it's taking too long. So
is he still with us?
I think he's with us right now. I'm gonna double check. Doesn't look like it. No, he's not here.
He must have left. That's too bad.
I've seen no other grades.
All right, so we will ask then one more round if there is anyone from our public participants who would like to ask a question about the budget. How about our committee members? We're going to have a little more time to discuss it, obviously, but do you have any questions?
So I do have a question, actually. What's the next step now, Adam? I mean, we have to vote on this budget and then it goes forward, or like, how does it work with your process now?
So this
Yeah, so
this
it's-
budget now
it's-
becomes our budget, and then we're gonna continue this conversation if you have any more questions. Otherwise, we're gonna vote on this one because legally we have to vote for a budget by the 30th, which is tomorrow. That's the
Okay.
reason why we want to have the public hearing tonight.
Just gonna say, I'm guessing a lot of families were showing up too because they were hearing about the sport. So I'm assuming that's where a lot of our parents, once they heard the good news, maybe don't
Yeah.
have as many questions.
Yeah, I just want to, that's a great point, Audrey, and I want to really reiterate this. I know that it is an unintended consequence, but obviously we are very happy and hopeful that we're going to be able to keep all those great programs we have, including athletics. The more we raise doubts beyond what we know, it tends to really become a snowball that affects some folks' decision to, at times, choose some other school district. There is nothing that should lead us to believe at this point in time, based on the information available to us, that there will be additional reductions or cuts to that budget, including athletics or any other program or service. So I would just go with that outcome from this conversation, and with that mindset from this conversation. Should anything change, because the whole world is evolving out there, would absolutely have it, but we know that we're not going to be alone in that conversation. I guess what I'm trying to say is that we have seen often that when we inadvertently give the impression that certain things are being reduced or cut from our services and programs, some folks choose to, I think it was Kim who mentioned, choose to go to some other school districts. There is nothing really at this point in time that should make us think that we will not be able to have those programs and services. And if we do, we will absolutely be as transparent as possible and share that information as soon as possible. And hopefully I did not interrupt something else that you were saying, Audrey. All right, she has visitors anyway. Cool. Okay, so let's just do a final check with our visitors to see if there's any hands. I was just getting used to the hands, and I don't see Steve, actually. I don't know if you are, Alex. It's unfortunate. So I will basically, if there are any questions outside this that our community members would like to ask, please feel free to reach out to the school committee. We typically share those questions. Well, actually, we always share those questions with our administrative team, our superintendent, and our finance director. So we will get you the answer if you need the answer. We would like this to be a continuing conversation. But we appreciate everyone who came for the public hearing. Thank you very much. Your input is always appreciated. Hopefully, the recent changes, as recent as a couple of days ago, to our budget in the positive direction gave some comfort to those of you, if you were here, to hear about the potential reductions to our programs and services, including the athletics. And hopefully we will be able to keep those programs and services the way they are. So with that, yeah,
just a
please
quick
go ahead.
reiterate to
Yeah.
and I love how many people are here right now. It's great to see all the participation. So just a reminder to all the families that are listening to that our emails are on the school's website. You can find it under the digital backpack. Email us, reach out to us. We're hoping to keep this conversation alive beyond this point.
Yeah, and to add to that, Audrey, I think you reminded us last time. Let me just do that this time. What matters really is the town meeting at the end of the day, because that's where our budgets, all of our budgets, are voted on, and the funds are appropriated at that time. If you have any concerns, any questions related to the school budget or any other budget for that matter, please make sure that you come and join us at the town meeting as well.
Yes.
Cool. All right, with that, we're gonna wrap up and conclude our public hearing for the FY21 budget, Granby Public Schools budget. Again, thanks everyone for joining us for the public hearing. We will resume our regular meeting right now. So you don't have to leave us. You're more than welcome to stay with us. If you have any questions that were not related to the budget and you had some comments, we have our visitors' comments as we open the regular session. Okay. With that, we will return to our regular agenda, and I will open it to see if it opens for me. All right. So how about this? If the school committee doesn't mind, I will move the visitors' comment to the top so that we can have that conversation first, and then we can continue with the rest of our agenda. Is everybody okay with that?
That sounds good.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So Kim, do you still have comments for the visitors' comment section? If you can just raise your hand now that we know the feature. Okay. All right. Alex, can you please help with that?
Yep, Kim's on.
Okay. Go ahead, Kim.
Hi, Kim Goldsmith, 239 Taylor Street. Just kind of a second part of what I had said before. When I went on to look at South Hadley and Belchertown, and I've also seen some postings from Springfield, I know there's no plan set as far as what the, DESE is saying as far as reopening, but these other schools around us do have several reopening plans, especially listed on their websites. So just personally as a parent, I'm getting anxious and wondering when school committee is going to start discussing any sort of opening plan, whether it be A, B, or C, 1, 2, or 3. Just because as a parent, I would like to make a decision for my own children and our personal lives and businesses on whether if, plan number 1 is kids going, like Adam had mentioned, 1 week on, 1 week off, and things like that. I mean, I know school is a couple months away, but as far as planning for childcare and things like that, that's something that we need to start planning soon. So I know this is a question to answer, but I'm hoping to see soon on, school committee's agenda, some sort of partial plans, couple of plans, any sort of idea of plans to, try to plan on our part on what we're going to be able to do with our kids.
Yeah.
And that was what I wanted to mention.
Okay, thank you, Kim, for that. And let me just take a stab at it. And I don't know if Cheryl's still with us, and if Cheryl has any comments, or anyone else for that matter, I will turn it to them as well. So you may recall that we actually had several conversations related to the potential opening of schools. The challenge at the time was that we did not really have any guidance from the state. Given that that guidance was made available to us either last week or the week before, everything is now becoming a little blurry. But only recently, any plan that we would have put out there in the absence of any guidance from the state is basically moot. We had to wait for the state's guidance. I believe the state is telling us that there are a few options that they are considering, and they are asking for the collaboration of the school districts to decide which way they can and they would like to go, depending on a few factors, in fact, several factors. And I believe they're also telling us that by August, they would like to see plans from each school district. So I can assure you that there will be multiple conversations that the school committee will have related to the school reopening. For several reasons. One, to better understand what the guidelines really mean to us. Also, on top of that, to make sure that we have a plan, which we are required to do anyway, that we can submit to the state, approve and submit to the state as we continue to work with our administrative team. So with that, I will, if Cheryl's with us, Cheryl, are you there? I guess not.
Yes, I am. And
Okay, cool.
notice, can you hear me?
Yes.
Again, it's public comment. So I was going to go over a little bit of our thoughts during my
Yes.
superintendent update. So if we can hold till then.
Yes, we can. And again, just to reiterate, we will have more conversations around that because obviously it's an issue that is important to all of us. It's about safety, health, and we will have multiple conversations, and we will be working on those plans as we are required to do.
I don't know if you can still hear me, but I did forget to mention one thing. The other thing I also saw was there's tons of surveys going out to parents in regards to what parents' daily activity looks like, who can have childcare, who can't have childcare, and all these questions and answers and surveys and percentages are all on these town school committee pages, which I haven't received anything like that myself personally. So I didn't know if that was something else that was going to be in the near future.
That is good to know. Thank you for sharing, and obviously we will look into that. And again, we will have a lot more conversation on this. Thank you for sharing that.
Thank you.
Yep, thank you. Anyone else for the public comments? Let me see if there are any hands. Okay, I don't see any more hands. All right, so now we can return to our regular agenda. We have a consent agenda, unless I'm looking at an earlier version of.
Did he freeze for anybody else or just me?
No, he's frozen.
Okay.
Yeah, he's frozen.
It's usually me that freezes.
I was
so I
gonna
was
say,
just-
Jen, you want to take over? Vice Chair, the consent agenda on.
Well, he had noticed, I think he was gonna say, he wasn't sure if there was other stuff there, so I don't want to take over for him. There you are.
Can you hear
You
me?
froze.
We can, yep.
Okay,
froze.
sorry about that. I don't know what's with Zoom. I used to dislike very much Skype, and Skype is behaving much better, and Zoom now is acting up. So I apologize for that. I don't know if you heard, but I was saying that we have a consent agenda, but I would like to take a couple of things, which are mainly the resolutions, out of the consent agenda and discuss them separately and vote as the consent agenda, the minutes from our June 16th meeting, and then the disposal of outdated equipment. So with that, with those resolutions moved out for further discussion, can we have a motion to approve the consent agenda? We still have an opportunity to discuss if there are any changes, edits, but can we have that motion first?
Because they're all piled up together, Stephanie and I cannot vote on the minutes for the June 16th meeting, correct? Because we were not members at that time.
You can vote on it, but you cannot make the motion if you're not at any meeting. Yes, that's correct.
I'm having trouble. I can't even find the meeting, the consent agenda in my folder for the 29th.
Yeah, that's why I'm thinking something happened, because I seem to recall that there was something here before.
I thought I saw the minutes before. I thought I had, but all I have now is the agenda
Yeah.
for the 29th.
I
and
don't
then
see
all
it
of the
either.
budget stuff. So I don't know.
Okay,
I-
so let's
I
just
left-
do this. Let's just table this one, and
Sure.
we'll, Adam, is there anything urgent about the disposal of the computers? Can we vote on that next time? You know?
Yeah, I don't believe so. I thought that had nothing to do with me, so I'm sure we can move that to the next meeting. There, it's not time sensitive.
Okay, great. So we will table the consent agenda and we will move to the rest of the agenda now.
And just to circle back to Audrey's comment, I was under the impression also that her and I could not vote on a meeting that we were not a part of. So just for
No,
the
you
minutes.
cannot. Well,
Okay.
actually, you can vote on minutes. You can vote on, even if you were not at the meeting. You cannot make a motion to approve those meetings. That's that's the only thing that you can do. If the majority of the committee already is going to approve the minutes, you can be part of that. You can vote for it, but you can refrain from voting as well. You don't have to vote.
Just for a point of reference for you girls,
Yes.
when I first started, there were a few minutes that I felt, after reading through, that I felt comfortable voting on, even though I hadn't been at the meeting. And then there were some that I abstained from just because there was so much information and I didn't feel comfortable to vote on the minutes because just I wasn't sure I had the flow of the conversation. So you just kind of use your best guess as you're going through. You know, if you have to miss a meeting and then you watch it or whatever, whether or not you want to vote in on it.
Yeah, the minutes are basically, our approval of the minutes is registering the record of the previous meeting in writing. And I really appreciate the question because, you know, for clarification purposes, we are going to register that record for public consumption as the result of that vote. If you're not there, obviously you cannot know whether or not the minutes are accurate. That's the reason you cannot make the motion for it, or you can second it. But you know, if everybody else is okay, you can actually approve the registration of that record for public consumption.
Okay. Good to know. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for asking. All right, so moving to new business. As I mentioned, I would like to make sure that we have a conversation about the resolutions that are that were in that consent agenda. That's why I just want to bring them up here. There were 3 resolutions listed. One of them was related to state funding on school budgets. The second one on federal funding of school budgets. And the third one, funding of school budget for state mandated COVID-19 expenses. So just a very quick note, and then I have a couple of questions.
Is the other resolution in the other folder? I only see 2 in our folder.
Me also.
I'm just explaining that. Yes. So the resolution that is in your folder is actually referring to both state and federal funding and asking both federal elected officials and state elected officials for their attention and decision to support education and school funding. For that reason, I did not keep a separate, even though at the time it was very short notice, I just in case put those 3 resolutions there. I think there is no need for us to have 3. That one covers both state and federal side. The one that Robin actually shared with us, I edited to make sure that there was a mention of small and rural schools in there. So it's not the exact same, but it includes references to state government and federal government and funding coming from both of those governments. So what we are in effect talking about in that particular one is to make sure that our elected officials are not giving up on funding education, understanding that the times are rough and different due to the pandemic, because there are certain responsibilities of our elected officials, and when we prioritize them, it seems to me at least that the well-being, health, education, and the civil rights of individuals should be prioritized. With that in mind, many school districts received the same resolution, and many school districts already voted and approved that resolution. So we wanted to put it in front of this school committee for our discussion and an eventual vote. The second one is related to a concern that some of our friends who were at the public hearing raised as well. There is an expected cost that school districts will have to incur because of the additional cost of materials, PPEs, everything related to COVID-19 related protection efforts. And that second resolution is specifically written for that. I believe it was penned by our friends on the Amherst School Committee. They
Yes.
also had shared it with other school districts, and by the time it was sent to us, about 70 plus school districts across the Commonwealth had voted in favor of that one as well. Just wanted to let you know. So with that, I will turn it to all of you for your comments, questions, concerns about either one of those resolutions.
Emery, I would also like to make a comment.
Go ahead.
Robin Lamorter, Granby Educators Association President. We all have T-shirts, Granby Educators, and on the back of it, it says Stronger Together. And when you adopt this resolution and tag Granby to it, we are stronger together, because this puts you right there with all of the other towns around and throughout Massachusetts who are adopting this resolution and really demanding that the funding for any funding that comes to the school be given to the school and not be cut. So stronger together, and I strongly encourage you to read it and see that it is just asking to give what is due to the schools and not cut.
Yep. So thank you for that, Robin. I appreciate it.
problem.
To the members of the school committee, would you mind if I know that these are not really the shortest texts, but just for the public's benefit, do you mind if I quickly try to read through these so that everyone knows what we're talking about?
Is there a way for you to share your screen? Would that be easier?
Is there a way for me to share my screen? Alex is the person to answer that.
Yes, I made that available for all panelists.
Okay. I'm still disabled.
So it's at the bottom.
Right, I'm still disabled.
Oh, I
Okay.
have the.
I got it now.
I should be able to do it because I think when we got kicked off by for whatever reason, it reset my settings on you guys. So I apologize.
Okay. Thank you, Alex. I appreciate that. So the first one is the one that we received from Robin. The main template is coming from the Teachers Association. And I will just show this. Well, okay. So this is going to the governor, the education secretary, education commissioner, the Senate president, House speaker, joint education committee co-chairs, as well as our own elected officials from our own area, Senator Eric Lesser, state reps Mindy Dom and Dan Carey. So I will just hold this portion on my screen for a minute for everyone to glance through. And we will post these as part of our meeting records as well, so everybody knows what the school committee voted on.
Is there more to scroll down, Emery?
Yes, there is. So the only addition here that we made is this section where we are referring to school districts that are small, rural, and less affluent, which in many ways represents school districts in Western Mass. So with that, we are asking Congress, the United States Congress, to approve funding for education, as well as the Massachusetts legislature and Governor Charlie Baker to fund public education in our state, staying true to the Student Opportunity Act, as I mentioned, that was just passed earlier. Okay, so as we have this on our screen, any questions, comments, concerns from our committee? Okay. Is there a motion to approve this this resolution?
I'll make the motion to approve this resolution. I can't see the full name at
Thank you,
the
Jen.
top.
It is, you can just, right, there you go. Thank you, I appreciate it. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, thank you. Any additional discussion? Okay, all in favor to approve this resolution in support of education funding in COVID-19 era, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you, Robin, for sharing this with us.
My
Thanks for
pleasure.
bringing it forward.
Okay, where's my folder? But now I'm gonna share the second one. As I mentioned, this is specific to the additional costs that are expected through due to the safety precaution that we will need in our school districts as we reopen. Just a quick reminder that I mentioned earlier, as part of the DESE guidelines, we also received some note that there was a good amount of funding that was considered for school districts to be able to do this. It doesn't really change our ability to discuss and vote on a resolution like this. This one is much shorter, and it's right on your screen. And by the way, those of you who are watching us and who are with us as visitors, these were already shared with the school committee. We are sharing it to make sure that you had an opportunity to see these resolutions also. Okay, so are there any questions, comments, concerns about this particular resolution related to the funding due to the COVID-19 related expenses? Okay.
I can make the motion to approve the resolution for the COVID era expenses.
Okay.
COVID related expenses, sorry, for state
Right.
funding.
Thank you, Jen. Is there a second?
I'll
I'll
second.
second Jen's motion.
Okay, thank you, Stephanie. All right, any additional discussion? Okay, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Any abstention? Okay. And I only asked that because I lost my screen and I could not see all of you. All right, so with that, I will stop sharing my screen. Those were the only two that I had for resolution. Going back to our agenda. We have a discussion on the, and thank you all very much, by the way, for approving those resolutions.
Yes,
Hey,
Emery,
Emery,
your two new members just made two very important votes. Thank you very much, ladies.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Robin.
Emery, sorry,
Yes,
can we go
Adam.
back to that? Can we go back to the technology thing and let David hop on? Because he does want to get the process started for disposing of that stuff.
Okay. Dave's with us?
I see Jackie's on. Does she know why the minutes are not in there? Because they definitely were before.
Yeah.
I honestly have no idea because I know they were before too.
They definitely were.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I know I didn't do anything, so I'm not really sure. I will put them in the drive, or I can put them in for the next school committee meeting.
All right, no worries, Jackie. I think we can, table the minutes. But
Okay.
since Dave is mentioning that this may have some urgency, is the school committee okay if we bring this vote out of the consent agenda and discuss?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Dave, are you with us?
Yes, I am.
Okay.
This is a routine vote that the school committee takes once or twice a year.
Right.
It's more commonly used in Granby because we get a lot of donated computer equipment. And it has a shorter, because it's donated and used, it has a shorter life cycle. So we have to turn it over more frequently than most other schools. So I have a closet full of equipment, most of which was donated to us, that we used for several years. We were very, very grateful for it, but it has exceeded its lifespan. It's unable to run Windows 10. Some of them are not functional at all. So I just want the permission of the school committee to use the recycling facility that we've been using for the last several years to pick it up and to recycle those materials.
Right. Thank you, Dave. And just to clarify, there, for whatever reason, documents related to the minutes and the disposal, they are not in the folder. So we just wanted to make sure that we had at least some discussion or some explanation before we voted for these two items. So thank you for being there and thank you for letting us know. So this is basically our routine disposal, but with that explanation, I think it adds clarity. So taking that out of the consent agenda, is there a motion to approve the disposal of outdated equipment?
So moved.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. Any discussions or questions from our new members related to disposal of equipment?
I do have a quick question, just out
Go
of
ahead.
saying that, it's a company that we've always used or the same. Is this something we obviously have an expense out of?
We don't pay. Actually, it's a free service because the company gets the materials from the computers and they sell it. So if they break the plastic out and the metal and they recycle it, they sell it to people and they make money off of that. So basically the service is free to us. We don't pay for anything. All we have to do is move it to one common location by a door and they come and pick it up. And they also assure us that if there's any data on any of the hard drives, they destroy it as well. So it's a good deal.
Sounds good.
Any other questions? Thank you, Dave. Okay, all in favor to approve the motion, please say aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed? Any abstention? All right, thank you. Thank you, Dave.
Thanks, David.
Okay.
Thank you again, everybody. Have a good night.
Absolutely, you too.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining us. So the other item under new business is related to data dashboard. Is Stacy with us?
I saw her name before.
Hold on, guys.
She is. Just needs
Okay,
to be
good.
brought over.
There we go.
Hi, Stacy.
But we can't hear her.
Well,
She's
you're on mute, Stacy.
Can you hear
there
me
we go.
now?
We can.
Okay, perfect. So over the past year, I've been able to collect student enrollment data and special education data for Granby, which has now been compiled into a dashboard. It was shared with each of you in the school committee folder, but I'd be happy to share my screen so the public can see kind of what I've been working on.
Alex, can we do that? Or is everybody on the panel already?
She's good to go.
Okay. Stacy, just to, okay. now see it.
I was
All
gonna say, I
right,
don't
thank you.
actually remember seeing this in the folder.
Actually, mine wasn't opening, but it's the second item from the top. There is an image, and then there is a PDF file. Looks like it was added yesterday. If that's what you're looking for. Great. Go ahead.
Okay, so everyone can see my screen, correct?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So the first slide that you're going to be looking at is the monthly enrollment by grade level for the school year in 2019-20. This data comes directly out of our student information system of Redeker, and it includes both the resident and school choice students in these totals. As you can see, we have grown by about 10 students this year, which is fantastic. So we're able to see which grade levels are gaining those students. Moving on to the next slide.
Stacy, I have a question on that one.
Sure.
So at one point, let me ask it differently, take a step back. So for those of us who like to use the DESE website and try to look at the data that they have, how often do that site get synchronized with the information that you are sharing with us?
So the DESE website generally takes the data from the October Sims collection and puts it onto the website. So they update theirs about once a year.
Okay.
They're not synchronizing as the year kind of progresses.
So the increase that you talked about, for instance, would not necessarily be on their site. Is that fair to say?
Correct. Yes.
Okay. All right.
Is there
Is
any
this-
other? Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, is it something that we're going to be able to maintain going forward and as a committee be able to look at with some frequency? I don't know what that frequency is that you're updating.
Yes. So what's going to happen is there is certain data that I can pull every month, which will be this data as well as the next couple of slides. It's going to be pulled on the first day of the month for the previous month. That way, with the link that I sent you guys in the folder, as I update, it will regularly update in that link.
Okay.
So as things are going, it will automatically kind of go.
Okay.
The plan is moving down the road is to get this onto a section of the website so it's always available.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
And what's the last date that this was? Was this from as the end of June?
Yes, it's last day of school.
Because I know some of these numbers are already going to be adjusted down, because I know of at least two students personally that have school choiced out. So
Yes. So the way that the reporting cycles work is the last day of school is the end of the fiscal year reporting wise for state reporting. Any students that leave from the day after the last day of school through the first day of school next year are counted towards the 2021 school year. They'll
Okay,
be
that makes
considered
sense.
summer exits.
thank you.
You're welcome. Any
So
other
we
questions?
do a comparison of June of this year to September of next year?
Correct. So it will start, the newest dashboard will be a June rather than a September start date,
Okay.
and then June to June.
Okay.
So then the flip side of what Jen mentioned, I know that there are folks moving in town and they have school age children. So what is it fair to understand that we're not going to see those numbers added during the summer, but September they're going to be there?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
So anything that's coming this summer, any ins or outs will be included in the September first data dashboard.
Okay.
At the end of the month, though?
Yeah. Well, as we stand right now, we will be starting in the end of August. So those numbers you'll actually see June, August, September, and the numbers for the summer entrance or exit will be in the August. So I believe we start the 20 something. I can't remember off the top of my head. So very close to the last day of August. So those numbers will be updated fairly quickly.
Does anyone remember what month we voted on for school choice? So we can see what we allowed in for.
We actually
February.
didn't.
It was
Yeah,
February? All right.
yeah, we voted for next year though.
No, I know. I just want to see like what the plus, the pluses are for each group. That's all.
Well, they were still potentials. It doesn't mean we actually took those people in, correct?
I understand. I
Yes.
just wanted the numbers. That's all. Just what they are right now with what we're
Yeah.
seeing at right now and how many we had agreed to admit. That's all I wanted. I just couldn't remember what month.
Had to be February.
Yeah, we can take a look at that later. Go ahead, Stacy.
Okay. Any other questions on this slide before I move to the next?
No, I'm good.
All right. The next slide is just a visualization of the number of student entries, withdrawals, and total enrollment for each month. As you can see, September, this is East Meadow. September is obviously our biggest movement because of the summer exits and entries. You can see from this, we had 25 students enter East Meadow over the summer this year, and we had 15 that exited. And then we've had enrollments in October and January, as well as February and April. And we've had just an exit in October and November. So to kind of get a visualization of that. The following slide is of the high school. We can see that there's been 21 entries with 23 withdrawals, but we've added additional students as the month's gone on and have lost 2 in January.
Stacy, is there any additional explanation under the data that you're sharing? So if we're looking at, for instance, 2 students leaving the high school in January, do we have anything that says, hey, can you just check the reason why you're leaving us?
Yes.
Okay.
So that's actually in an upcoming slide.
Okay.
Okay, good.
So the next slide is just a kind of a district quick overview, just to kind of see how many in total are we gaining and losing as we're moving forward. The next slide is your reasons for withdrawal by month. So for our September exits, the biggest reason was moving. Students moved out of Granby, whether they moved out of state or to another town within Massachusetts. We've also had students that have chose to go to charter school, or that they've choiced out, or they've dropped out. They fall into the category that they're in foster, so they were moved, chosen to go to private schools, or were our school choice children and went back to their home district. We have one case that it was unknown why they were leaving. And then there was a few students that chose to go to vocational. So this kind of breaks down where and why. This is actually data that's derived from a spreadsheet that the admin assistants are keeping as the year progresses.
And this is the withdrawal for both schools, correct?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Any other questions?
No, that's good.
Okay.
This is actually, as a side note, I know that many of my friends in the last so many years who were part of a similar conversation who probably had a tear in their eyes because, we always ask, okay, why? Well, if anybody's leaving, why? If anybody's coming in, why? And we never had a visual like that. So thank you for it.
You're welcome. The current slide that we're looking at is the resident and non-resident enrollment comparison in kindergarten through the 12th grade. The dark blue bars are Granby residents, and the colored bars above that are the non-residents and what towns that they're choicing in from. So just to kind of give a breakdown to see the biggest districts that students are choosing to come from. Any questions on that?
Wow, we have someone coming from North Brookfield.
Yes.
All right.
Do we likewise have anything if they choice out where they're choicing to?
So yes and no. There is, this is hard to kind of explain. So during the January timeframe, the districts are required to send out the list of students that are choosing to go to their school. That's really the only way that we get any data for where they're going. And it includes charter schools and private schools. So there's not a graph that's currently made from that data, but I do have something on hand that I can put together.
I'm just curious, thinking about,
Yes. Yes. So
why
I
they're
have
going.
a fairly good idea of where they're going.
Or even if like there is an exit interview of.
Yeah,
Nope.
no exit interview.
Oh.
So sometimes they tell us where they're going, or we have to send their student files over to the new district. That doesn't make it to me necessarily, but if the admins are putting that on to the exit sheet that they're tracking, then I'm able to see it kind of more. But the students that have never attended Granby and have always just choiced out, that's when I find out that data in the January collection.
Okay, so similar question to the earlier one that I had. When I go to the DESE site and I look at the students who originate from Granby and go to other districts, I can see the name of the districts. How accurate is that? And do we know whether or not that aligns with what we may have in our district in our records?
So that is as accurate as the other districts are reporting. So when they're sending in their October Sims collection and they report a student as being enrolled that may be a Granby resident, that's where that data is coming from. If they report incorrectly and say, yes, they're a Granby student and that student has since left their district, then there's going to be a discrepancy there. It's for that piece, it's based kind of on the other districts. Yes, there could be a difference for what we see here if the data that they send in January isn't the same as what was reported in October for DESE, as well as if, a student moved and said that they were going to South Hadley when really they went to Amherst, and that's what they let our admin assistants know, we could have a difference there.
But we don't get an official record of it. Is that how
no,
it works?
no, there's no official.
Okay.
The only the official record is the school attending report in January, where the districts have to send us a report of Granby residents that are attending their school. This year I sent out the kind of form for the districts to fill out to every school within a 30-mile radius, trying to catch as many students that may be elsewhere. And I've
Don't
got,
we have to pay though? Like, isn't there some kind of a record, or is every district the same? Like, how do we justify, how do we make that work if we're,
correct.
sending
So that goes
private
in the
schools
school
different price than-
choice claiming form.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it is the same. Every student is 5,000. If they have any sped services that we're paying for, that gets added on to that kind of tuition. The virtual schools are more expensive. So Greenfield Academy and TECA, they're about $7,500 per student to go. But we don't pay for the private schools, obviously. And the Vokes, there is an agreement with them.
So are you, when you were referring to us potentially not knowing where a Granby student is going, were you referring to private schools primarily, or it could be a public school as well?
It could be a public school as well. So I will find out the private schools when I receive the school attending in January. But other than that, there's no kind of report or anything that DESE kind of shares with all of us, so we know sort of where everybody is.
And this is true for all school districts in
Yes.
Massachusetts?
Yes.
And by the way, you're not really, whatever you're sharing is not really the first time I'm hearing, but I get almost as surprised, almost shocked as the first time I heard it, that we're talking about a twilight zone where, some students may or may not be somewhere type of thing. And with the simple question that I had the first time I asked this, I don't know, 8-9 years ago. So how do folks know that their attendance is accurate? Because you have to know which students are supposed to be in your building to be able to say your attendance is accurate, right? And I was told that almost no district actually can 100% tell you that their attendance is accurate, which is mind-boggling to me. But I guess that's something that we need to work on as a state.
Yes. So there is the potential for, say, a resident student is school aged and never enrolled in a school. So for someone in that category, we wouldn't be able to track them, nor would the state or DESE reach out to us and say, there is student A who should be attending school. Are they enrolled in Granby? Yep.
What about
then again,
homeschool?
I guess going back to Jen Bartos's question, there is this financial transaction that happens as a result, right? If you're school choicing out, school choicing in, there is some amount of money that is moving from one district to the next. Is there a way to triangulate using that type of record, or is that blurry also?
So that's a great question. And this is something that's on my radar. So the only real option is to get the list of the students that are getting school choice. They're choosing to be school choice out, and comparing those names with the census to try to determine if those students are truly still living in Granby. It is not an easy feat. Just if the students were not reported on the census, then there's really no other way for us to look out for them.
What about kids that are homeschooled? Are they reflected in this? Like, are they considered a school choice out?
They are not. So they are considered homeschool. They have to technically apply for homeschooling and send in documentation to the superintendent's office, which Jackie keeps for any sort of, kids that are withdrawing for homeschooling, or they've been homeschooled since they were, could enter school. They are kind of their own category.
So I have a question. We provide services to those kids, right? So, or we can. So are those ever reflected in our numbers?
No.
Ever?
So they're not technically enrolled students with the Granby Public Schools. They are considered homeschooled, even though that we may or may not be providing services.
Do we get funding for them?
No.
Okay.
Stephanie, did you have a question?
No, I'm just reading and
right.
wrap my brain around all of this. And it seems like I don't want to say it's a broken system in a sense, but I can see it's really difficult to track.
Yeah.
It is.
All right, let's
just jump in for a minute. Homeschooling, each year, the school committee approves the recommendation of the superintendent to approve homeschooling plans. So each year you are notified of the number of students in the district that are being homeschooled.
Thank you, Carol.
You're welcome.
Stacey, you can move on.
Okay. So the next slide is looking at historically how the district has changed over time. just kind of going through each of the different lines in the graph. The first is the kind of red orange at the very, very top. That's the total number of students that live in Granby and they're attending some type of school. They may be attending Granby Public, they may be choosing to choice out, they may be going to a private or a vocational. This is just encompassing all of the students that live in Granby. This data is coming from that school attending report. The next blue line underneath that is our resident enrollment. So these are Granby students attending either East Meadow or Granby Junior Senior High School. I think one of the biggest things to kind of pull from those two is that the number of school-age children in Granby has decreased. But we seem to be coming up a little bit. There's a slight rise from the 2017-18 school year. Moving forward, the green is all of the students that I have record of school choicing out. You can see that there's been a significant decrease from 162 in 2010-11, all the way up to 186 in 2014-15, and we're down now to 65. The red is the non-resident enrollment. These are our school choice in students. We can see that, again, back in 2011, we were at 142. We dropped in 2016-17, and we're kind of coming back up with school choice students, with students wanting to come to Granby. The purple is the record from, again, the school attendance report in the January, February area that shows the students that are choosing to go to private school. In 2014, we had a giant spike of 220 kids choosing to go out to private school. Right now, we're about 53 as of this year.
So just as a comment on that one, that's primarily McDuffie with all the incentives that they were offering. Many town residents had the opportunity to send their children there. And that's when we saw that large spike. In fact, I was just looking at the timeline. If we were to go a year before to 2009, 2010, or maybe a couple of years before that, we would see that there was a spike, some sort of a spike on the school choice out also because of the things that change in our own school district. Mm-hmm. So this is great for us to be able to align certain historic moments with the reaction of the parents and the students. That's why it's important for us to make sure that we keep this in perspective and all the dramatic changes that happened in terms of enrollment in Granby.
Absolutely. Looking at the next line, it's sort of a marigold color, I would say. That's the homeschool students that have chosen to homeschool over the years. And as of this year, we had 13 students that were choosing to homeschool.
Yeah.
It is interesting that the number of homeschool goes up in time with the private school thing. So there was something else that was happening in the district at that time too. It wasn't just McDuffie. That's correct. A pretty big spike. Yeah. So something was happening at that point, regardless of McDuffie moving in or not.
Well, that's something probably was related. I'm just speculating. I don't remember every year anymore, but probably related to some budget cuts and things that happened. That's usually what happened.
Stacy, I have a question.
Sure.
Does homeschool include kids who are doing online school?
No. So Greenfield Academy and TECA are considered public schools. So they would be school choice out students.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. The next line, the orange line, is for the vocational schools, students choosing to go out to either Pathfinder or Smith Voc in agricultural. That has been kind of, I think, the most steady over the years. And I know they have their certain quotas, how many they can accept from each town. So that would be why it's around, 17 to 22. And the final pink line is the students that are choosing to go to charter schools. It's increased over the year. And the schools that they're choosing are the Hamden Charter School of Science, the Pioneer Valley Chinese Immersion School, and the Pioneer Valley Performing Arts Charter School. So that's just one thing that will be interesting looking into next year. I'm actually really, really intrigued for next year to see where these numbers go, to see if our homeschool increases or the choice in, choice out, based on not only the COVID situation, but also the housing market increasing. So it's going to be interesting to see where this graph moves to.
Stacey, the surprise to me, even though I did know that there was an increase in the number of students going to private schools from 60, is that suggesting that we went up to 220?
Yes.
Private school? Really?
Yes. So yes, from 2013-14 to 2014-15, and it's from 60 to 220.
Yeah, I know that that's not entirely explainable with, McDuffie or anything that I know. So that's interesting, as I think Jen, you were saying, to find out what that means.
If you look back up to at the first line, the total school attending,
yeah,
the population of Granby school age students was up to 1,300. So there was also an increase in population at that time.
That is a good point.
And is the public school, the private school only McDuffie, or are there other private schools?
No, there's more.
As well?
So the two private schools that I got responses from, I'm actually pulling up, there were three. It was McDuffie, it was Pope Francis Preparatory, and it was Children's First. So the kindergarten program at Children's First is considered a private school.
But that's only in the last 2 years or so, right?
I don't have the answer.
We had Children's First before.
But I believe
the kindergarten program is only 2 years old, though.
Okay. All right.
Children's First is primarily up until about 2 years ago, and I speak with authority on this because my girls went beforehand, and Lance is on the board. But the kindergarten program is not that old, but they've been a daycare forever in their area.
Okay.
And before and after school care as well.
Yeah. Stephanie, you had something?
Oh, I was just going to say exactly what Jen said, just that they've been around, but their kindergarten is newer. So the private school reflecting kindergarten would just be the last few years.
All right. Good to know. Thank you for that.
All right. Thank you. All right.
Sorry, one other thing, Stacey, you just said it was Pope Francis, Children's First, and
McDuffie.
It was McDuffie. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting. So you didn't hear from like Wilbraham and Munson or Williston either, which I think a few also.
Yeah, no, they said they had no students attending.
Oh, okay.
For this year, but not ever, not
every, yes, for this particular year. So the other years could in fact contain, a whole bunch of other districts.
So that jump in 2014, they could have gone there.
Yes.
Yeah. Other school. Right. Okay.
It's amazing to see how many came back the very next year, though. To go from 220 back down to 75.
But if you look again at the population, just in that year, it dropped 200 students within that year.
Crazy.
22 to.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's a big jump.
Yeah, that's an interesting jump.
Was the base open? Was there something going on at the base?
I don't think so. We're talking about 2014-15. But anyway, if there are no other questions, let's move on.
Okay. And just to kind of finalize this graph is going to be updated. You can kind of see with the boxes around it. Some are going to be updated at the end of each month. Some are updated during the October, March, and June Sims collection, and the others will be updated during the school attending report. So some are going to be static for most of the year, but some of them are going to have fluctuation as we're moving.
Cool.
But moving on to special education. This is just the percentage of special education students out of the entire district. So the blue is Granby students receiving services at one of the Granby public schools, and the red is the percentage of students that are outplaced and receiving services elsewhere.
Now this includes homegrown Granby kids and school choice all together,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
All right.
And that is actually it
Cool.
in this dashboard. The next dashboard that is going to be designed is around the assessment data moving forward.
Stacy, do we have any access on the a little more technical side? Do we have any access to something like Tableau or any other data visualization tool?
We are. We've been using Data Studio, which is part of Google.
Okay.
The caveat with that is, in order to present the data, it will come in either PDF format or it needs to be posted to a website. So
Right.
if there's any sort of like slicers or different functionality added to it, it can only be utilized if it's in like a website format.
Okay. Yeah, it sounds like the, former year Tableau, which, they always thought that that was a visualization tool. But I think there are some tools now that allow us to download to PowerPoint and others. And the only reason why I'm asking is this is great information. Thank you for sharing, first of all. Some information that we did not even have access to that easily, that readily in past years. So much appreciated. But is it possible to really change the visualization a little more to add a little more clarity and maybe eventually make it available for everyone to see, what?
Absolutely. So right now, this is in Google Sheets. All of the data is housed on my side in Google Sheets. These graphs are in real time. So anytime I make an update, these graphs will update. So if there's any additional data that needs to be added in or a different design, we want to see a pie graph instead of, a chart. That's something that's easily manipulated.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any questions for Stacy?
Yes. So this is, you guys were saying, a living document. So as those times progress, we'll be able to click back in and see how it's updated. Good to know. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Cool.
Thank you so much, Stacy. That was really great to see. And thank you for sharing your screen with everyone. I think that was really helpful.
You're
Great
very
insight.
welcome.
Thank you, Stacy, very much for
welcome.
coming and sharing.
Anytime.
Sounds like we're going to see you often now.
Yes, I think you will be.
Great. All right. Sounds good.
All right. Have a great night, everybody.
You too. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. So we do not have any other items in old business, and we have our standing reports. So I will ask Adam, since one of the main purposes of tonight is for us to discuss and vote on the budget. I assume that we're going to do it in your business office and facilities, or should we have that conversation now and discuss and vote?
Yeah, so
I may have made the wrong assumption. I just assumed it was part of your finance discussion and standing.
So to be honest, I wasn't sure when you guys are going to do it. We can do it whenever. I don't have any updates. Obviously, the FY21 update would be us voting the budget. I can give a quick FY20 update. We are now in the middle of closing out this year. So I would say next meeting, I can provide a update as to where we are for FY20. The last warrant for FY20 expenses to be paid will be, I think it's July 31st. Chris responded. I want to say it's the last week in July. That'll be the last time we can pay any FY20 invoices. So over the next month, we'll be kind of reaching out to vendors, making sure we get all outstanding invoices paid, seeing where our surplus and deficits are. I'll be bringing some transfer requests to the committee for approval so we can move some money around, some journal entries. So I can give an update next meeting on FY20.
Okay. All right, thank you. So with that misunderstanding, then just let's go back to our budget conversation with our school committee. I know that you only had this weekend to see that latest version of the budget, but what are your questions, your concerns, your thoughts about the updated budget, which is basically currently net school spending plus 205,000?
I feel a lot better about it.
Okay, that's good. Well, I
Agreed.
hearing that.
Same.
Any questions for Adam about any specifics of that budget?
Do we know with the 205 number, is that just for this year, or is that sort of what they're thinking from now going forward, or was there any kind of parameters around that?
Does the town get to vote on that change?
I don't believe so. And just Jen, to your question real quick, I don't want to speculate, but I'm assuming we wouldn't get that $100,000 back in subsequent years. Just a speculation and just the tone of the talks in the previous years about wanting to take it away. But I don't know. That's just speculation. That's just my opinion. So I'm not sure.
And what about
And Audrey, to
Audrey's-
your point, I'm not sure. Emery, you might know, and I feel like this was talked about at some point. But is that 305 or 205? Was it, or is it because it was a separate town article when it was voted in that it has to be voted on to be reduced at this point, or no? I know they explained it somehow where now it's just a part of our budget.
So that's an override amount, as you mentioned a few times already. So the way that works is that the first year, the override amount is spent for the purpose it is earmarked. So the very first year, it was with the legal understanding that it was going to be used for the schools. Afterwards, the finance committee and possibly the select board, in conversations with the school district, they decided that they were going to keep the 305 as part of the school budget for an extended period. However, what happens, my understanding legally, is that after that first year, the override amount becomes part of a general fund. That means it is still incurred by the town, but it becomes part of the general fund, not necessarily earmarked. And when the town makes a decision that it is no longer used for a particular purpose, changes can be made to that amount. So there is really no vote, as far as I understand, no vote needed, no other conversation needed. It is an amount that is already incurred. And then I guess this year, the amount that the town, based on all the conversations and Chris's analysis, they decided that, or at least Chris decided that the budget would have 205,000 out of the 305. So if that's what you're asking, that is basically the reasoning behind that.
Got it.
I also want to make sure that we all understand. I don't know how many folks are with us anymore, but really our budget conversations have been reflecting some success that we were seeing in our school district. Over the last few years especially, we were able to take a lot more control over our budget, and Adam was part of that also. Be able to look at different ways of doing our work so that there were some efficiencies realized. And with all those efficiencies and the amounts gained, we were able to do some great things without really continuing to put a lot of burden on the town budget. I don't know if this is the second or third year, but we were really, if you look at our numbers, we were on that downward trajectory, getting to that net school spending plus 305 number, which was until recently the parameters that the town was giving to us as we were coming up with our own budget. Or if I put it the other way, the conversations were so long as you can remain with that amount, which is net school spending, minimum net school spending plus 305, we're good. Anything in addition to that needs to be brought to the town meeting and needs to be discussed. We found ourselves on a few occasions in that difficult situation to stand in front of the town meeting and make the case for the school district. So the fact that over the last few years, we were able to go to the finance committee, select board, to the town with a budget that did not require anything more than the net school spending plus 305 was actually an indication of the changes that we made to our process, the way the budget was created, and the way we were looking into taking advantage of efficiencies within the school district by doing things differently. Just wanted to, as a side note, add that.
So I do have a
go ahead.
question. Just thinking about, things we don't know, we don't really have anything definite yet as far as if we're coming back to school, what it'll look like. So we've got these budget numbers, but if we don't start school on time, school will start, but if we don't go into the building on time, do we have the ability to adjust the transportation number if there are no sports played in the fall because MIAA says no sports in the fall? Are we able to count that as savings, or like how do we think that'll play out? Or do we put that money towards some of the savings and not have to worry about grants? Like I'm just not sure.
So again, without, because we're going on 2.5 hours here, so without getting too much into it, essentially tonight, as the committee, you're voting on a number for the budget. Now, in that number is a lot of details that we want to obviously adhere to and stick to throughout the year. But we need to keep in mind, we are voting on a number. Once that number is approved at town meeting, the school committee has the autonomy and the authority to make transfers and move money around where they see fit. So to your point, because there's so many unknowns, essentially for tonight, we are voting and hopefully approving that number to be brought forth to town meeting in the article. And then if things change, we are, as a committee and as a district, we're going to have to talk about, shifting line items around and moving expenses around.
Okay.
Does that answer your question, Jen?
Yeah, I just wanted to know. I figure I can't be the only one thinking that, so I thought I would throw it out there, but maybe I am.
We'll make it look that way, so it's, yeah.
Again, and I've said it a million times, and pretty much everyone has, like, there's so many questions that are unanswered that we might not know the answers to them for another month or so. I mean, it's just the nature of what we're dealing with right now. So I just want to put all of that in perspective, that tonight is just, I don't want to say just a number, but it's a number. And then once it's voted on at town meeting and approved, we do have the autonomy to move that money around where we see fit and where we might be mandated from the state to move money around. So
I'm assuming at some point we're going to need a motion too, correct? To make this vote happen tonight?
Yes, absolutely. We're not going to leave without it.
Shall we jump in?
All right. Unless there are any other questions.
Any other discussion?
Any other? Yeah. Okay, so I'll entertain a motion to approve the school budget. Adam, can you please? Did I freeze or did Adam freeze?
He just lost his.
I'm here.
Okay. You're there? Okay, can you
Yeah,
please?
I know what you're gonna ask. You're gonna ask me the number that we're voting on, correct?
Yes, please, yes.
Yep, let me just get it.
10,585 or something.
It's the 8.5 number, the 8.559 number.
Okay. That basically is net of in-kind expenses. Is that the one we're voting for?
Correct, essentially,
Okay.
yep.
Do you want me to share that? Or do you have it? Can you please
I have
share
it.
it so that
Yep.
a motion can be
You want me
made
to
with
share
that?
Yes.
Yes,
You want me to
please.
share my screen, or you want me to just tell the?
No,
say
you
what the
can
number
just
is?
say the number. That's fine.
Okay, so the number is $8,559,395.
$395?
Yep, 8,559,395.
Okay. All right. So if we can have a motion for the amount Adam just shared for the FY21 Granby Public Schools budget.
I'll make the motion. Do you want me to say the whole thing?
Yes, please.
So I move to vote to approve the budget for 8,559,000. No, that's not right. 8,559,395.
$8,559,395.
Correct.
For the fiscal. Thank you.
2021, 21, 22. What is it?
2021.
2021.
Fiscal year 21.
Fiscal year 2021. 2021. That's, yeah. Cool. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. Is there any more discussions? Questions, comments? Okay. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Any abstention? Okay, well, our FY21 budget is approved unanimously. Thank you, everyone. Really appreciate it. And
yeah, thank you, everyone.
Really appreciate all the questions that we had tonight as well. Again, you know, this is an unusual circumstance. I did not really know how the public hearing was going to go, but really appreciate everyone who dialed in and came with their questions. So thank you. All right, so I will move our agenda one more time with
One
one
last
more
question,
thing.
Emery. Do we have a follow-up meeting at this point?
Follow up on?
We don't meet tomorrow, but do we have a next? I know I had asked that last time.
What do you mean by follow-up meeting?
Our next school committee meeting scheduled for.
That's the last thing that we're gonna do. Yes, I promise. It's on my notes.
Okay.
Okay. I know you want that. Jen, was there anything with the collaborative?
From the last meeting, they were still not sure how they were going to reopen because they hadn't had the guidance yet from DESE. They were also looking into different online learning platforms for remote learning. There was no funding change in their early childhood. So they're still working with families and the school districts to see where they need help and guidance. The Mount Tom, they're uncertain about how they're going to open up just because they work with HCCC, the Holyoke community. So they're not sure what that's going to look like, because when we had this meeting, they still hadn't had the guidance from DESE yet. That hadn't come out yet. So, and they're also looking at different ways of for their PPE, for their that. And then we're going to hold an extra meeting in August. Normally they don't have through the summer any meetings. So we're going to go through that. And the executive director is retiring. So they have
Oh,
a
really?
search out. Yes.
Huh.
So,
All right.
yep.
Well, thank you for sharing all that. Cool. Any questions for Jen?
Nope.
All right. So as you probably noticed, I saved one item to the last. If Cheryl is still with us for her superintendent's report.
I
I
am.
hope you
Can you
can
hear me?
get video. It'd be nice if we could see you.
No video. I'll lose you if I try video. So I wanted to give you an update on where we were with the DESI guidelines and our work. So first, can we confirm that July 14th would be the next school committee meeting? I know you're going to talk about, are you going to talk about that after, Emery?
Yes. Yep.
Okay.
But July 14th is good.
So if that's the case, then let me just back up to the calendar. That would mean the 28th you would have a meeting. So we would be getting draft plans to you by the 28th for review. But to get there, we need to have 3 plans. We need to have a full return to school, the hybrid model, and the fully remote model. So within the next 2 weeks, we will be sending surveys out to staff, students, and families regarding their thoughts about both the full return to school, the hybrid model, and also getting input and feedback from the full remote learning that we did this spring. And we'll take that feedback and develop those 3 plans. And currently we're looking at really sort of 5 big buckets. One is meeting the square foot per student variance of 3 to 6 feet for social distancing, what that means. Whether that's going to require additional classrooms, additional staffing, additional furniture, additional materials and supplies. One thing that DESI's asked from us is to do a feasibility study, but they're going to send us more guidance on exactly what they're looking for. So while I certainly appreciate that other districts appear to be out in front, I don't know what they're out in front with because DESI hasn't given us any guidance yet for the facilities feasibility study. So again, we have a ballpark as administrators of what we think is going to come. But until that feasibility study information comes, it's a little premature, I think, to put out that survey information. We're looking at health services and some ideas around reorganizing health services suites to accommodate potential cases and illnesses and how to keep the 2 separate, whether it's the flu or whether it's potentially a COVID-19 case. And again, in health services, looking at additional materials and supplies and the development of protocols and procedures that will have to be specific for any COVID illnesses that we may see in the school buildings. The other bucket that we're looking at, the 3 left are facilities, transportation, and technology. So you can think about what we're thinking about in terms of how we're going to have protocols again in deep cleaning, protocols for daily cleaning, if kids are moving between classrooms at all, how that cleaning can occur, and then the additional materials and supplies that would be necessary to disinfect the building on a regular basis. Transportation, we are really still waiting on DESI to provide some more guidance in terms of how they're going to allow students on the bus and how many students on the bus. That will necessarily have an impact on our hybrid model and our return to school, because if we can't keep all of the kids on the bus, we're going to have to consider how to get kids in and whether it will be an increase in bus runs to get students into school. And then finally, the technology bucket, which is huge, obviously, is the hybrid and the full remote learning. So with remote learning, I think we have a good head start on that plan. Our remote learning plan was pretty robust comparatively. So I think for us, it would be really a focus on providing training to teachers over the summer in August and those early release professional development days to really focus in on aligning our curriculum with instructional technology and potentially students being home more than or very quickly being moved into a full remote learning environment. So we're looking at hopefully getting the first draft of the plans to the to Carol and the DLT by July 22nd. And then the week that early in the week, and then later in that week on the 23rd, hopefully, you know, DESE will get their guidance out soon. But the DLT will go over those plans and then present them to you for July 28th. So that's the timeline right now. And that should get us an August submission to DESE.
Cool.
Any questions?
Audrey has one.
So I do. So, because we have the August deadline, should we be moving this up so that we're not seeing it on the 28th and then needing to vote on it so immediately when, because it needs to get to them?
Yeah, it's a great question.
I mean, that's really tight.
So
It's
my
not giving
thought
us
is,
much time to roll it over.
my thought is he's not, yeah. My thought is there's no way for DESE to get us the guidance on the feasibility study, which is the first step. We don't even have that. And now we also don't have the timeline, I mean, the templates for the actual plans. So I think my vision is that he's probably not going to get the deadline of early August like he's looking for. I'm thinking we're going to be more second or third week of August, you know, before we have to have those submitted. So my thought is, you know, we can submit them to you on the 28th, and then by the next August meeting, you know, we can have your feedback, we can have a discussion, and then we can present revisions to you at that next August meeting, and we can submit, and we will be within the guidelines, I think, of DESE. We'll meet their timeline.
I mean, my concern though is obviously like parents are going to want to know something before the third week in August, but obviously.
Oh, no, yeah, yep. So, yeah. So that's why I think we're going to survey parents and be communicating out the results of those surveys earlier than that. But in terms of having your final plan to you, you know, that I also, on the other hand, don't want to rush and make determinations that, you know, we don't have good feedback for. So
when we submit that plan in August, does it then need to be approved before we can go back to school? Not by us, but by the people you're submitting.
Well, that's the idea, I think. Yeah.
So if we don't submit it
it's a
until
whole
the third
world
week
of
August,
unknown.
if we don't submit it until the third week of August and we start the fourth week of August, how does that give us enough time to be able to even implement the plan?
It might be a thought too.
Well, I would think we would have it. Go ahead.
I didn't know if maybe in August, after we see it on the 28th or something, or I don't know, like whether or not we should try to meet again on the 4th rather than wait 2 weeks to meet each other and see, you know. I don't know.
So here's a thought. It seems that the final approval will be with DESE, but in the meantime, I did not hear, and correct me if I'm wrong, Cheryl, there is really no strict allocation of authority to DESE in terms of what can or cannot be done within the district. So in other words, we can actually start having these conversations, brainstorm, talk about some possibilities based on what DESE already shared with us. So that we are prepared at the time when we need to really structure that plan. We are better prepared. We have some of these things discussed and shared with the public as they join us. That may be, you know, as I think all of you are suggesting, that may be a reason for us to kind of start the conversations earlier and maybe add a meeting or two in the middle if we need to really hold shorter but still focused, topic-focused meetings. And that
Well, yeah, I mean,
we would be better prepared for early August then to be able to make a decision if hopefully DESE has everything in place and then they are in a position to review and approve at that time anyway.
right. Well, I would assume that, and I will tell Carol that at each of the school committee meetings between now and when we present the plan, we would be giving you updates on the work that we've been doing in collecting data, collecting feedback, you know, so it isn't like we are silent until the 28th. It's just, that's for me, the deadline that we need to try and hit. And I think it's reasonable. I mean, it's already almost July 1. You know, so to get surveys out to folks, to, you know, for us to even have a feasibility study that we don't have from DESE yet, we're pushing on the envelope. So, you know.
Yeah.
Those surveys, are that going to be something that,
oh,
sorry. Go ahead, Cheryl, sorry.
Yeah, we'll provide updates at every meeting between now and to your point, Audrey, I think it will be important, and we probably will have to have some special meetings to address reopening.
Yeah. Audrey had a question.
I just started to think of like making sure we're reaching families and getting the information back on their opinions, whether or not it's going to go out via email or if there's other ways that, you know, it'll be a survey monkey or something like that to make sure we get the feedback back.
Yes, we get really good survey results, actually. People have become accustomed to them, I think. So, you know, we're getting upwards of, you know, between 100 and 200 responses. So I think this is going to be important for families to participate in. So I'm hoping that number will be even higher. And we've already worked the DLT with Stacy on generating some beginning surveys based on some surveys that we have seen in other districts. But again, waiting to see what is DESE looking for in terms of a feasibility study, you know, what part of parental input are they looking for? So if we don't get it from DESE, you know, we're going to move forward, obviously, without it. So I think the best way we've seen is SurveyMonkey through both the app with a link and then the school messenger or Blackboard Connect. So
yeah.
We've tried surveys in Blackboard Connect right through the phone, and that doesn't work very well for us.
I think I can also reach out to, it was mentioned earlier that some of the neighboring districts may have done their surveys or may have had some conversations. You know, even though in the absence of DESE, it can't be finalized, I would be curious to find out what type of conversations they had, and I can bring it back to the committee. Yeah. Maybe that would be good information for us to build on. At least we would know what other districts are doing. So let me just take that as a takeaway, and I'll share with the committee, and hopefully next meeting we'll start having these conversations. Anything else? Any questions on that? Okay. Cheryl, what else do you have for us?
That's it.
That's it? Your last meeting, that's all you have for us?
That's all I've got. I know, I don't really have, I mean, you know, I said my thank yous, and, you know, it's been a pleasure to serve Granby. It's, you know, I've made amazing friendships, and collegial and personal and professional. So I take a bit of Granby with me, and certainly what I do know is that you are in extremely capable hands, and I wish the school committee the best of luck as, you know, you're navigating what we all are, certainly during this very difficult time.
Thank you, Cheryl. So let me just take then 1 minute. to wrap this conversation up. So we had Cheryl with us for a little over 4 years, right, Cheryl?
Yes.
Yeah. So I remember that when we had the interviews, we sent a question to the finalists and we said, we're working on a strategic plan, and here are some of the themes, and come prepared to discuss what you would do if you were to focus on a plan like this. And Cheryl, I believe, was the only one who really had written down, in detail what she would do if she were to come to Granby. So we were lucky enough to have her in Granby. And one of the first things that Cheryl started working on was a strategic plan. The concept of strategic plan outside the district plans and school plans wasn't really as common. We did not really focus on a strategic plan per se. And we had, as I mentioned, right before she came to join us, had created a strategic plan. So with Cheryl in, we started working on the current strategic plan that we are all familiar with. That kind of allowed us to look at everything a little differently. Instead of really rushing and tactically pushing on things and trying to find immediate answers, we started asking, even at our meetings, okay, how does this align with our strategic plan? What do we need to do? Even our budget conversations had some element of that. So that was one of those changes. The other thing is something that we talked about even tonight a few times. We were really going through some tough time, and tough time happens, especially when it comes to budgets and finances. But what's really important is for decision-making bodies like the school committee to receive some clarity and transparency across the process. And what Cheryl had told us is that, as we look at my administrative team, I expect that we're going to have the right folks in that team who will be able to give us that transparency. With many additions over the years, we actually were able to, at least from my perspective, very successfully handle some of the shortcomings in our budgeting process, added a lot more clarity, not for the school committee only, but for the public as well. We try to do our best to reach out to other town committees to provide additional information to the members of our community. It may never be enough, but it was really year over year showing a lot of great improvements. As members of the school committee, I personally appreciated being the chair for a few of those years, but I think we all enjoyed a level of great collaboration and partnership. We definitely did not agree on everything. We had a lot of interesting to hard conversations. But at the end of the day, we always knew how to really come to that reconciliation, come to that point where we could all leave a meeting or a hard conversation with a smile, knowing that we still had a lot to discuss going forward. So that was always much appreciated. The one last thing that I will mention is almost as soon as Cheryl came to our district, she changed the recording on the voicemail or the voice response that you would hear, which also was on her email signature and everywhere, about focusing on every student and every classroom every day. To be honest, some of us really were like, okay, just, I'm trying to leave a voicemail and I'm listening to Cheryl telling me that she cares about every classroom, every student every day. But that really was, and hopefully came across all the conversations, that was how we were having our conversations. And I give a lot of credit to Cheryl for really coming to all these conversations, reminding us that at the end of the day, what really, really mattered was the students, is the students. All of us are here trying to do our work. We have responsibilities. Same thing for our teachers. They're trying to do a wonderful job to help the students. But what we really care about is the well-being, the safety, the education, the enrichment of all the students in our district. And I think, Cheryl, in your work, that came through very clearly in our conversations as well. So for all that work that you've done, for everything that you contributed to, thank you so much. I personally wish you good luck in your new adventure, your new endeavor. I will miss our conversations. It's not really very easy, as you can tell, to have a conversation with me. And we had sometimes multiple phone conversations, especially during the budget season with Cheryl. So I feel her pain, but I really appreciated all the clarity, transparency, and information that she was willing to share with me. So good luck with everything. Thank you very much for everything that you've done, and hopefully our paths will cross someday, somewhere.
Thank you, Emery. I will say that Emery and I had a very similar commute in the mornings and evenings. So oftentimes my entire commute was discussing the budget with Emery. And I will miss that. I can't imagine that I would even say that out loud, but I did miss it. And I wish Carol the very best of luck, because you have the same commute now with Carol.
Yes, but I'm home for now. At least she's gonna benefit from that. But it is true that I would call her as I'm leaving the driveway here, and I would end up at the parking lot in Hartford. After that traffic. I mean,
garage.
Yes. So thank you, Cheryl. Anything else that we? No, absolutely. Thank you. Anything else, anyone, before we wrap up? We already had our executive session, so we don't have anything else on our agenda. If there is nothing, last thing, as promised, when do we want to meet, especially over the next couple of months? Do you have your calendars with you that we may just at least put some dates on our calendars?
Yes.
Okay.
So we say July 7th? No, not the 7th.
I thought that we said the 14th.
14th. 28th.
Yeah.
But I feel like, not to add more, but after that, I think we might need to add another. It just seems like it's really tight.
Right.
Yeah.
Can we just back up? We're definitely saying we're all set for tomorrow.
It'll depend on whether or not, are we presenting this to the select board to vote on?
No.
No.
Next time it comes up is at town meeting.
Okay.
What's
we had
go
a
ahead.
tentative meeting scheduled for tomorrow, and I think we're all set because we voted the budget tonight. So I just want to make sure before I delete it that we're all set.
Yeah. Is there any need for us to meet tomorrow, especially after a long meeting? I think we did everything that we were. That was actually tentative because, again, we had the legal obligation to vote for a budget. If that wasn't going to happen this evening, we were going to extend the conversation to tomorrow. From my perspective, there is no need for it, but I'm open to entertain any.
No, I think we've met plenty. I just want to make sure before I get the time back in my life that it's. That's all.
Yes, absolutely. I want to do the same. So tomorrow not being our next meeting, my question is this. Should we wait till the 14th, as we were saying, or should we consider meeting on the 7th of July with the possibility of meeting on the 21st? The challenge is probably we're not going to have that much on the COVID-19 preparation topic that we just discussed by the 7th, other than what Desi shared with us. But I can certainly reach out to the neighboring towns and see if there's anything that I can bring back to the committee. I'm only asking because between now and the town meeting, we only have so many Tuesdays if we want to discuss anything related to the budget potentially, or if you're willing, we can keep the dates as they are, and then we can call additional meetings if they are needed. So the 14th can still be our next meeting.
I feel like it would be dependent on whether the schools could get us enough by the 21st versus the 28th.
Well, that's what I was thinking. If it
That
takes
is-
2
yeah.
weeks to gather information, it's going to be the first 2 weeks of July. So there would really be nothing for us to look at
Until
to
at least the 14th.
correct.
Okay. So tentatively, how about July 14, July 28? I
Mhm.
think one of you mentioned that we would do the first week of August, which would be August 4th, if everyone's okay with that. And if you're not, please let us know. I mean, if you have major plans, we don't want to.
I'm supposed to be on vacation on the 14th.
Of
So-
July?
Yes. So we have 1 week planned, the week of the 14th, and then we have a 2 week block, the 10th through the 21st of August. I can possibly, I have more luck in July, possibly being able to call in on the 14th because I think we're going to be staying home most of the time.
Okay.
That'd be good if we met on the 4th then, for you, right?
Yeah, the 4th I can make work.
Next week?
July 4th, August 4th.
That's next August 4th.
Because you said you're
You were
leaving
talking
the-
about August 14th or July 14th?
July
Jen?
14th is we're saying our next meeting. I'm supposed to be on vacation.
Okay, all right.
Not guaranteeing that I'll be able to be there. If we're home, because we're not sure if our plans are open yet or not. So if we're
Okay.
home, I'm able
All
to
right.
call. I'm just letting everyone know that I'm a
Okay.
definite maybe.
Yeah, okay, so if the consideration there is that we may not have enough information the first week of July,
Mhm.
I would still offer to move it to that first week, but we may not have enough information for the reopening conversation. I don't have any problem meeting that week.
I mean, the other option would be the 21st, the 28th. You know,
I'd rather actually start the conversation a little earlier so that we don't have to
Okay.
wait. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm good with that.
So Jen,
I like the 14th and the 28th. I'm just saying there's a possibility I may not be able to make the meeting of the 14th. You're all in capable hands. Like, I'm just being honest up front.
No, that's appreciated. Do you mind if we just go with the 14th and 28th?
Nope.
And if there is any change that indicates that we may have more information on the 7th, but that's next week, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're not going to have anything next week, more than likely. All right, so let's keep
Well,
it as
do we have
is.
any
And then,
do we know when the surveys are going out? Like any of the parent surveys?
yeah,
going
even
out?
that, I was thinking about that. Yeah. So,
So
I know it really just makes sense. The 14th is
okay,
really the
let's just
best
keep it
day.
as is. How about the meeting after the 4th of August?
I mean, it all
I
depends.
think we should
on-
wait. I think
I
we
do
should
too.
wait until our meeting on the 28th. We have the 4th, and then we should plan out because we're not going to know what we're looking at.
I agree.
Uh,
And
So you
we'll
don't
have a
wanna go-
clearer picture with what's happening over time right now too, and where
Okay.
Massachusetts is at, and
So I think I hear that we don't want to go beyond August 4th. Is that what it is for now?
I think I'm okay with that if everyone else is.
Okay.
That's my vote for now. I just think so many things are changing that why put ourselves out there and plan where we might have to do something different anyway.
Right.
Okay. So I understand. I agree. Let's just put this in the back of our minds that we may need to meet on the 11th and or 18th as well, depending on what we have. If
So just book August 11th, definite.
not
And we need
definite,
it.
but if we have, I guess what I'm understanding is it's going to depend on some information. But given that we really want to get to the point to vote for something, if possible, sooner than later, given that, school's opening at the end of August, I'd rather not wait till, the last week or close to that last week to
My
say,
understanding of Cheryl was that she planned on us potentially voting the 28th of July. And maybe I misunderstood that.
Okay.
Not necessary.
No, I don't think Not
Okay.
necessarily. I think I'd like to present
Oh,
it or
present
have
it.
it be presented on the
Yeah.
28th.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah.
My
And then-
apologies.
yeah, and then so the 4th, yeah, the 4th would make a lot of sense if you
Okay.
could schedule it, because
So-
then you might actually, you know, if the stars aligned and Desi gets us guidance and, you know, we're able to get all of this together, you could actually have a vote on August 4th.
Cool. So let's do that then. Let's now agree on the 14th, July 14, July 28, and August 4, and then we'll adjust as needed as more information becomes available. Sounds good?
Yep.
Any other questions aside from that? Appreciate everyone's patience and contributions on this fairly long meeting. Cheryl, again, thank you. Good luck. Thank you, everyone who stayed with us, who joined us and who stayed with us. Is there a motion to adjourn?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
All right. All in favor, please say aye.
Bye.
Aye. All right. Have a great evening, everyone. Thank you again, and we'll talk.